Hello and welcome to Media Musings after a 5-month break. Thank you for sticking with us and coming back if you are around. Before we start, a little bit of admin. Would just like to take a few moments before we get into the conversation today to remember a very dear friend to us and to this channel. It's been a while, but this is the first time we have come back since Hops passed away. And so what I'd like to do in his honour is go around the room, ask everyone what you're drinking, say something if you like, and then we'll raise a toast to him. And if you're in the chat or watching, please feel free to join us. So, Ring, what are you drinking?
Coca-Cola.
Yeah, well, we all know you're a teetotaler.
Yeah.
So, yeah, anything you want to say?
I mean, Hops did good work, and he was, definitely a friend to the channel, and I'm sad to, I was sad to hear that he had passed. And Mark Caesar.
Yeah.
Gin and tonic with lime.
Chaos, what are you drinking? Anything to add?
I'm on Malibu and Coke. Hops has been and will continue to be missed.
Yep. Scummer?
Well, as it's Hops. Now, I know he probably wouldn't necessarily approve because we know Hops, he has named Hops Watch because he did beer reviews. So he might be a little disappointed. But on the other hand, I am drinking something Danish, so I hope he'll approve. I've got Carlsberg. On a personal note, Hops, when I first started coming around the community, Hops was sort of one of the first people I sort of got to meet and talk to and got friendly with. I always certainly enjoyed his content, whether he was doing something about, like a beer review, or whether he was doing like an atheist or a video or a political video. So I always enjoyed his content, but really just enjoyed the times when we were on stream together, hanging out. He was always a pleasure to have around. And gutted in a way, because he's a guy that we sort of hoped one day that I'd be able to actually meet up and have a beer with him someday in real life. Unfortunately, we won't get that chance now. He is going to be sorely missed by, I think, just about everyone who knew him, and he definitely will not be forgotten by myself, and I imagine I speak for quite a few other people saying that as well.
Yep. Same for me. I too am gonna have a Carlsberg before I go into the gin and tonic for Hops. Hops, I was always very kind to me. I'm kind of on the edge of the community you guys have because you're the atheist community. It was very kind to me. Always had a nice word to say, and was always very friendly. Always very open to have a chat. And on the streams I was in with him, he always gave the impression of a gentleman, a gentleman, but also a very intelligent man as well. But he didn't make you feel stupid, and that's a rare gift in a lot of people, and that's what I knew Hops as. So what I would like to do now, while I pour my beer and try not to give it an atrocious head, is ask you all to take a moment, and we will. Yeah, sorry, Hops, that's not good. Is take a moment and we will raise a glass to Hops, to Hops's memory.
To Hops.
Cheers.
Cheers.
As he'd say, cheers.
Right. That's the admin out of the way. Well, not the admin, that was the thing we wanted to do for Hops. Actual intro, I'm going to hand over to Ring for that, as it's their channel and their show.
So, So this is the first week, well, second, but technical issues last week. This is the first week.
I'm technical issues.
of what I like to call LitMonth, but given the fact that I moved in the middle of the summer, I didn't have time to do any reading really. So this month, for the most part, in celebration of Banned Book Week, we're doing movies based off banned books because it's easier to discuss a movie. You know, it's more time efficient to discuss a movie. And we're going to finish it off with a discussion on the minutes from the meeting where the Tennessee School Board decided to remove mouse from their curriculum. So, to kick it off, we're beginning with the Da Vinci Code, which this was the first time watching it for me because back when I was a fundy, I didn't have anything to do with it because it was demonic. And then after I left, I didn't have anything to do with it because it was the Da Vinci Code.
Yeah.
And
sorry, you've
that's
just cracked me
valid.
up, Greg.
I think I have a copy of the Da Vinci Code somewhere. I can't say I ever got past the first chapter.
Yeah.
I think I had one right up until that toilet paper shortage last year.
I'll just get it out of the way now. I'm going to quote one of a comedian I quite like called Stuart Lee. There was a story a number of years ago when I think preachers in America burning copies of the Quran, and Stuart Lee's comment of it was, I don't believe in burning books, especially like holy books, especially burning like holy books but especially when there's like hundreds of pristine copies of the Da Vinci Code in Waterstones. If you're inclined to burning books, just saying, you know.
And hold on, come on, stupid computer.
Okay. Yeah. So we are going to establish
first a correction in case I didn't enunciate well enough earlier. I said mouse as in the Art Spiegelman graphic novel about the Holocaust.
Yeah. So what we've established is that this book it's explaining this book is more complicated than the book itself, and that's about 95% of what's wrong with it. This book thinks it's clever, and it's just not. It's aimed at someone with the average intelligence of about a 10-year-old. I remember reading it in my early teens and thinking, this is stupid, these people are idiots. And I say reading it, I went to the library on a Saturday afternoon because my school didn't stock this book because it was a Catholic school, and my parents refused to buy it for me, and so I went to the public library and read it. I found out later my parents refused to buy it for me because I got it for Christmas that year. But yeah, that's how my parents worked. That's what happened there was my dad said, no, you can't read that, and my mother worked on him for several months, and then I got it because that's how that goes down.
So it was mother's fault then.
Yeah, mother's fault. But in her defense, I did ask for it, so
yeah. By the people.
Go ahead.
Sorry, but by the people who did Horrible Histories, there is a book on cryptography and the history of cryptography, and it is genuinely more advanced than anything in that book.
That's valid. Yeah. To be fair, the Horrible Histories are not bad. Like, if you were to say to me, how should I introduce my child to X period in history? I was like, get them the Horrible Histories book. Start them there. Like, if they're under about 12, Horrible Histories is perfect for them.
Yeah. And I will say, before we get much further into the episode, as much as we're slagging on the Da Vinci Code, this channel is 100% anti-censorship. I mean, there's a reason we devote the entire month of September to Banned Books Week.
Yeah, And I will say, right, this book, the movie is a mediocre movie with some excellent players and some excellent cinematography. The reason it's mediocre is because look at what it had to work with.
Yeah.
Like, you have to switch your brain off to watch this movie. It is definitely a popcorn and, like, you know, that kind of movie. It's not a movie you sit down. Well, I did sit down and take notes with it, and believe me, I spotted every plot hole. It was a nightmare. I do not recommend it.
Yeah, like, and, you know, just going through once, paying attention to things like cinematography and plot and scoring, I came away with it with like a serious sense of whiplash, because there are some really good like tidbits in there.
Yeah.
But then you get launched back into typical mid-aughts action thriller.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should talk about who was working on this film. You've got a Zimmer score in it, Ron Howard directing it, Tom Hanks and Ian McKellen in the starring roles. Like, this movie had everything. There is no wonder this movie was a blockbuster.
And you've got the likes of Jean Reno and Paul Bettany in the supporting casts.
Alfred Molina.
Yeah.
As the Cardinal.
Yeah.
Yeah. You
like
got
this,
some, you know, so you had some what we call Premier League players in this thing, you know.
Yeah. Like, let's be clear, this is a who's who of early noughties cinema.
Yeah.
Like, this is who are the people that we couldn't fit into the Gladiator movie? Let's use them for this. Like, that's how I imagine that conversation went down.
Seems plausible to me, frankly.
Yeah, it's like this film came out in 2006, and all of these people on it are at their peak. Some of them are still at that peak. Some of them have dropped off a bit, but they are at their absolute peak.
Yeah.
And you know, when you think about other stuff, for example, that Ron Howard's done, he did Senna more recently. You know, famously Breaking Bad, and it's like this is. It's probably a blip on all their CVs, to be honest, but it's definitely not their fault. And if you want a lesson in why the plot is just as important as all the set dressings and everything else, because again, Paris, beautiful location. This movie's it. Like, you can learn a lot from bad cinema, and this movie is. It's not bad cinema. It's not. Yeah. It's not bad for a MacGuffin movie. It's just a bad story, and that is the difference. And it thinks it's cleverer than it is. Like, it's winking at you so hard it's wearing an eye patch.
Well, and also there's a big disconnect between like what the film is overtly saying and what the plot of the film hinges on the film saying.
Yeah.
Because there's a whole lot about how symbols are culturally specific and they change with time, but the plot hinges on these symbols are secret messages passed down to us and they mean this thing.
And they're 1,000 years old and have never changed.
Yeah.
And also, like, I'm sure would Chaos like to take the rant on the presentation of pagans in this film, or should I do it?
I feel like we might have stuff to add to each other's rant, but I'm happy for you to take first shot.
I'm going to need more alcohol first.
I'm kind of glad. In a way, I'm sort of glad that I am not, that I'm in a way that I'm no longer a pagan. And I've got you guys here so that I didn't have to be the one doing straight away when the first thing you see is a pentacle, and it's the whole devil worship. I'm like, oh So straight away there, I'm wanting to go. Ah!
I will. The one thing I will say is that this film is very honest about how bigoted Catholics are against pagans. Like, it doesn't sugarcoat that shit. Like, that's about as far as I can go.
Yeah. So I will start with the very first scene where pagans are mentioned and give you my rant on that scene alone, and we'll see where we are then, Noodle.
To be fair, isn't that the very first scene where he's in the lecture hall?
Yes, I would like to also combine the second scene a little bit into it, but primarily that.
Yeah. Okay. So we start out. He gives the lecture, and then he's approached after the lecture in a public place, and someone hands him a picture of a corpse. Okay. First of all, no copper would do that.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. No. It was not a realistic shot.
In a room of probably at least 100 people, the guy's doing a book signing. You do not hand him a picture of a corpse. That is going to cause panic if all it takes is someone looking over his shoulder or overhearing you. And there's a lot to be said for the best place to have a private conversation is in a loud environment. That's true. But you also don't hand over photographs of corpses while having that conversation because someone will see it.
And you don't have a private conversation in a loud environment where just about everyone is focused on the person you're conversing with.
Yeah. Also, I would point out, going back to the lecture he gave, yes, in Spain, the White Hoods are a religious symbol. But one of the people in the audience who shouted out hatred or racism is very clearly Latina. Like, there is no reason they should have got that wrong. That was quite clearly set up to make Robert Langdon look clever and to hit the diversity quota for this movie. Like, that's what that was for.
Yeah, and also, if they were going to get clever about the historical uses of symbols, they could have at least gotten the symbols they showed right.
Yeah, because they did the white caps, they did the swastika, and what was the pentagram they did?
The trident.
Trident. And also the Ishtar statue.
Yeah, the Ishtar and
Isis and Horus, wasn't it, as well?
Yeah. And also, can I just, if you think you know anything about pre-Christian worship of feminine deities from watching this movie, no, you fucking don't.
Yeah.
This is
like,
also, I
felt so dirty after watching this movie. I literally went to my altar and I dropped a bay leaf to Diana and Bonadia because holy shit, that was badly researched.
I am doing a ritual after this stream.
And I'm not. This is not a defense of it. Again, once again, though, this is going to go back to. I feel what we're going to say this a lot. This is the source material that they were dealing with. They were getting this shit from. And I'm sure we'll touch on that in a bit, but we're not going to go through every single point that Da Vinci Code as a book gets wrong, because this will be like a 4-part stream, or at least. So
I will say this movie conflates Ishtar, Venus, Bonadia, Cybele, Diana, Athena, and the Virgin Mary as one entity. That's 4 different pantheons alone.
I also quite liked how when they presented polytheism, they presented a plurality of male deities and said there was one female.
Yeah, and also they talked about paganism as one thing, as if all pagans throughout history are the same.
Yeah,
literally within a minute,
they weren't even the same in the same city.
Within a minute of having said context changes depending on place and time, they generalized all pagans.
Professor Langdon's speech at the beginning basically lays out the thematic whiplash of the movie.
Look, Professor Langdon's speech at the beginning is evidence for you that most academics either don't understand or don't believe half the shit they come out with when they're in front of a PowerPoint.
I just see Mark Caesar's put something in the chat here. And I feel I wasn't going to address this early in the
we're getting onto it. I was about to say that next.
I will. As Mark Caesar's brought it up, it wasn't meant to be literal truth. Here's the problem: the beginning of that book, Dan Brown claims a lot of the stuff in there is historical fact.
Yeah.
He makes that claim outright, and it is not. And it is not in the least. And that's the problem.
Yeah, he makes the claim that it's historical fact. And around this book, when it came out, I don't know if people were paying attention at the time or remember. I distinctly remember people going on British morning television, which, okay, morning television is what it is, but claiming to be the living descendants of Jesus Christ while this book was in the charts. And while, like, this was a big thing. Like, people fell for this shit. And people accepted it as truth.
Now,
and we'll get onto that when we discuss censorship and everything later on. But that's an important thing to remember. The reception of this book was akin to mass hysteria.
Yeah.
It was like people really, really bought into it. It was madness.
You know, like I said earlier, when I was a fundie, I didn't have anything to do with it because it was demonic.
To be fair, I'd have thought you would have had something to do with it because it basically slams the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
But
I think the other thing is there was a lot of times where Jewish symbols were used and referenced as pagan. And that is dodgy as fuck, even for 2006.
Yeah, the Star of David, which is a major linchpin of this movie.
They basically just like, oh, the Star of David and the pentagram or pentacle are the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, what this movie did, it took tiny bits of truth, and I mean tiny. Like, there's less truth in this book than there are in horror movies that claim to be based on real events.
Yeah.
And it ran with them, but then it told people that this was the truth. And it's just, that's literally how conspiracy theories are born.
But, like, especially with the whole Council of Nicaea thing, they were so close that I can see why other people might have thought it believable.
They could have given a fantastic commentary on the Arian controversy, and they just missed the... Damn it, Dan Brown.
I will say... I'll post it in the chat a little later, actually, but there's a very good website that a guy I know, Tim O'Neill, who writes the blog History for Atheists, before he did that blog trying to correct atheists on a lot of their bad history, he did a big site called History versus the Da Vinci Code. So people do want to look at big, longer look into all the crap that book gets wrong. Tim's did a very good thing on that.
Now, before we get much further, I will have to say that when executed properly, the whole found footage, this is true, I swear, device, has a lot of pedigree because it is an actual, it is a rather effective, framing device.
It is, but you have to be honest about what you're doing. Or at the very least, you have to not prime your audience to not recognize that it's a framing device.
Yeah.
Like the fact that Dan Brown put that claim in the book of this is all based on historical fact. Yeah, but it's based on historical fact in the way a movie about a supposed haunted house is based on the fact that it has dodgy pipes.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's just go into the movie, because if we start now,
Yeah.
we're just going to rant about the ahistoricity of it for hours.
Now,
so
before we get into the pagan symbology on the body, I will have to cut in and mention a couple of good things, really good things that this movie does. Is first the first line we get from Fash
immediately sets it up as a MacGuffin movie.
Well, no, it is so perfectly French. Because Langdon comments on the pyramid in front of the Louvre. And Kat says it is a scar on the face of Paris.
That's in the book of
That was in the book as well. But then it was even framed then as it was a loaded question when he asked him, "What do you think of the pyramid?" And whatever answer you give is probably going to be the wrong answer to this. Yeah,
it's like, if I recall correctly, in the book, didn't he respond with, "It was a courageous design move," or something like that?
Yeah, it was a question, something about Mitterrand being courageous, because it was France. This was one of Francois Mitterrand's little projects or something with that pyramid. So he tries to give an inoffensive answer in the book, and still
Parisian, the French and Parisians in particular, hate anything new that comes up in Paris.
Yeah, they do.
They didn't like the Eiffel Tower when it first went up. So.
Yeah,
and
I mean, to be fair, would you like a however many 1,000 feet high dick in the middle of your city centre?
Yeah,
and
secondly, the elevator scene.
That is shot perfect, magnificent horror. That is a shot and a scene and cinematography that Hitchcock would have been proud of.
Yeah.
That is bang on.
And the angles, the close-ups, it communicates without a single word from Langdon that he is freaked the fuck out because he has we learn it's actual, it's claustrophobia, not just elevators, but he has a genuine phobia of being in this environment.
Yeah, and it is very much, and you see it in the moment when the camera pulls out of the lift. I'm going to call it a lift. I'm British.
Yeah.
You're in the minority here. It pulls out of the lift, and you see him just go. And for a scene that has no words from him, Tom Hanks acted the heck out of that moment.
Yeah.
Definitely.
That was very well done.
Well, he had previously made the comment about a picture being 1,000 words.
Yeah.
Which is, a nice way to prime you to look for those things.
So back to your paganism rant.
Right. Okay. First of all, there is not one single stripe of paganism. On this stream alone, there are people who have been adherents to 3 different kinds of paganism. Okay. Also, the idea of the divine feminine. Okay, he's quite clearly trying to talk about the branch of polytheism or paganism that existed prior to Christianity. He name drops Constantine. Constantine's version of paganism was Roman polytheism. There was the closest they got to a divine feminine was possibly Diana, maybe Bonadia, which is the great mother of Rome.
It felt based on Dianic Wicca.
Mystical. It felt more like it was based on the kind of thing fluffy bunnies whinge about on TikTok. I just you can do. Look, I as much as I say fluffy bunnies and all the rest of it, you can follow whatever path you like, and as long as it makes you happy, have at it. That's the beauty of polytheism. But when you are claiming to represent historical accuracy, and when you are putting your words in the mouth of someone who you have given the gravitas of being a Harvard professor, you better get it fucking right. Because people watching this movie, as much as movies are only for entertainment and enjoyment, and you shouldn't take them literally, people fucking do.
Mm.
And even if you're not going to get it right, you should at least get it interesting. And it doesn't even manage that. It manages to take one of the most interesting aspects of pre-Christian life and reduce it to a few pithy quotes and massive, broad overgeneralizations. And it's just... I want to say I expect better from Tom Hanks, but he couldn't help the script he was handed. I want to say I expect better than from Ron Howard, but he couldn't help the script he had to deal with. I don't expect better from Dan Brown, because for a lot of people, this was my first introduction to Dan Brown. But holy shit, is it bad? Like, if there are lots of paths to polytheism. If you found polytheism because you got curious about it from watching this movie, I implore you, go back and watch it after you've learned a little bit, and you will see how it just doesn't stand up to any level of scrutiny. It just doesn't, on any level. Like, you could talk about Romans, Greeks, Norse. None of it tracks with what this movie is.
I'll say you could get about as much accurate information about polytheism out of this movie as you can watching The Wicker Man. That's what I'll leave it at.
That's the level.
Yeah, I think that to go to the pentagram specifically a second, because that comes up a lot. The history of it, they have this obviously monolithic idea of paganism, but the pentagram isn't even necessarily specifically paganism, because while it was some of the earlier records of it that we have in kind of the West are from Sumeria, the oldest pentagrams we can find come from East Asia and East Asian cultures. And a lot of the modern symbolism behind it, especially in things that Dan Brown was drawing from, like Wicca, come from East Asian and especially Chinese conceptions of elemental protection and divine.
Also, I will point out this movie does conflate pentagrams and the Star of David.
Yeah, it's like 5 and 6 points, my friend. How do you do that?
How can you not count to 6?
Yes, see, it's a foxy, yeah, because I find that very difficult. Because there is a clue in the name, pentagram or pentacle. There's a clue there.
Yeah.
So to address something Mark has just said in the chat, if you were to present them in a real way, you'd need to explain them too much. That's not true at all, because even the things we've just mentioned now would have been sufficient. And these are objectively incorrect things they included that added nothing to the story. And this is a big part of the problem, is that the ahistoricity didn't serve the plot and it didn't serve the audience. You could have given a more accurate representation. And so picking noodle upon that, because I'd like to know you didn't do that to me, Mark, when I said the same thing a minute ago, just seems kind of off to me.
I will say, it would have been very easy to clarify that. All you would have had to do is, while he was giving that lecture, put up a pentacle and a Star of David and have it one random throwaway line of, and throughout history, stars in their various guises have been used to mean various things to different cultures. That's all you would have had to say, and you would have clarified that. It would not have been difficult. It was one line. And neither Dan Brown nor I think Dan Brown wrote the script for it as well, but he didn't correct that from the book.
And they got so close because they even talked about it being in history. They would have just had to say "and geography." Two words.
Yeah, 2 words.
And
so
he didn't write. I don't think he wrote the screenplay. No, he didn't write the screenplay.
I've also got some something to add on to the pentagram, pentacle, Star of David discussion. But the point I'd like to make doesn't come up until later in the movie, so should I put a pin in it or get it out with now?
Let's put a pin in it because we will be coming back to it because this
Yeah.
whole thing is going to take a lot of
Yeah.
explaining.
Yeah.
Um,
Being a military person.
yes, I was waiting for that one line. Although I will say, beautifully delivered by Ian McKellen, not quite accurate.
Yeah.
So we get into France, and he's bringing the suspect to the crime scene after having tampered with evidence and left the body on the ground for that's at least from, let's say he flew out of Harvard, that's East Coast, that's at least a 6-hour flight to Paris, if not longer.
I'm pretty sure he was giving the talk in Paris.
Yes, he was.
As part of a
Was
book
it?
tour. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that was in the book or not. I can't remember.
It was.
But even still, like leaving the body on the ground, in a largely Catholic country the way France is not going to happen.
Also,
and B, is not police protocol.
The way the scene is shot and the way Lady Cop,
Sophie.
Sophie puts out the timeline of events. He was murdered just before
London's lecture. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's maybe like an hour, half hour. They're probably still doing forensics work.
Yeah, but there's no forensics people around when they arrive, so clearly that's been finished.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where once all the initial forensics work's done, they photograph it and they clear the body out.
Yeah. Especially in a location like the Louvre.
Exactly. The Louvre is due to open at 9:00 the following morning for the tourists. They've got to be out by then.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so it's just irritating, like the procedural issues. And I can accept, okay, this is a popcorn movie, sit back, enjoy it, don't think too hard about it, Noodle. Yeah, I can do that. But I keep coming back to this thing of Dan Brown claiming that it's it's researched and it's true. You can't get basic facts right. Why do you expect basic police procedure and basic okay, I appreciate creative license.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, a lot of movies and TV shows do that, leave the body because it looks better and it's more dramatic on camera. But anyone who's claiming to have done their research had better have done their damn research.
I think for me, I wouldn't nitpick the historicity so much, even with the claim of it being kind of based on historical stuff. If they had gotten the information about history correct out of the mouth of the history professor.
Yeah, I think what I'm doing is I'm not necessarily nitpicking the historicity of the film. I'm nitpicking the historicity of the book, using the film as a prism to do it through. Because the book claims to be researched and all the rest of it. And I read a lot of historical novels that where the authors claim this was well researched, and we took psychics to their ancient home, and they claim, they make all kinds of claims. But you can be reasonably sure that the basic history is right and the basic facts are there. And with this book, you just can't. And this is a problem I have with it, is the book didn't quite know what genre it was. And that translates into the film.
And also, and once again, something we're going to put a pin in, that this problem really rears its head in the discussion between Langdon and Ian McKellen.
Yes. Which we'll get to, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But first we have the chase scene from the Louvre. Like, that's just a brilliant chase scene. Like, Dan Brown should stick to writing those. Dan Brown is good at those. They work.
Yeah.
Because that is ripped straight from the book, like, shot for shot, pretty much, so far as I recall. And it's good. It's great.
You know, and the GPS in the soap is a great,
classic.
Yeah, and it's shot brilliantly.
Yeah, and even like we immediately see, if that movie was released now, people would be calling it woke because Sophie's clearly the cleverest person on the movie.
Yeah,
but she is by far and away the cleverest person in that entire situation. And to a point where when you're reading the book for the first time, you're not quite sure whether he should trust Sophie or Fash or what's going on. And there's this moment where it's set in such a way you sort of wonder, she throws the soap out the window without telling him what she's doing and then has to explain to Langdon what she's done and why she's done it.
Yeah.
And for a moment, Langdon thinks she's trying to frame him in the book, if I remember correctly. And that's really well. It doesn't translate exactly onto screen, but it does go really well. And then we have our first set of puzzles. I have thoughts. I have many thoughts. Would anyone else like to say their thoughts before I give my thoughts?
I'm gonna share a couple. One of them being that there was not enough blood, but that I will forgive that for the purposes of them having had to set up a set. But even moving past how the blood should probably have gotten in the way of the messages themselves are not written in such a way as to be able to reliably come to a conclusion, even with the additional background knowledge that the characters had.
Yeah. So
and also he was shot and he's bleeding to death. How did he have the time to walk around leaving these blood clues?
That is explained in the book, that the bullet pierced his stomach, so actually his stomach acid was leaking into his body and it took him 15 to 20 minutes to die.
As Mark
that is explained in the book. I don't know how accurate that is medically, but it is explained in the book.
Mark Caesar, if you're asking the question, yes, I rewatched it last night. I can't speak for other people, but
I saw it this morning.
Last night.
I watched it for the first time last night.
So yes, it is very fresh in our minds.
And I'm sure we'll go back. I'm kind of saving the discussion for Opus Day for when we really got onto it. But these puzzles, look, if you give me a Fibonacci sequence and it's out of order, and then give me 2 more lines of text, and I'm supposed to think that these were all written by the same person at the same time, I'm going to go, oh, that's a Fibonacci sequence. It's out of order. The letters must be out of order too. That is not a clever leap to make. That's basic logic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That does not require a cryptographer. Like, I just, yeah.
I also think the PS being her initials is probably something the person who's been working with her for a while should have spotted.
Yeah, but she doesn't talk about a grandfather, I think.
And it was the initials for a pet name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I think I missed that.
So
he called her Princess Sophie.
It was deliberately.
Yeah.
It was deliberately to get her involved with the case, and But see this, because this is the whole thing where I kind of watching this and thinking like, I don't know. I was just sort of thinking to myself, you know, what Fash is making that thing about you find Robert Langdon. That's why the PS find Robert Langdon is his old the whole reason he's brought him in. I thought if he was really trying to identify Langdon as his killer, it might have been he might have just written Robert Langdon did it. It wouldn't be a postscript, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Like that. If that is not like if your priority is not telling people who killed you, and it's a postscript, it's probably not the person who killed you.
I wouldn't be writing some cryptic. I wouldn't be writing some cryptic shit first, and then I'd be like, if Noodle had shot me, it'd be like.
It'd be like
blood. Fucking Noodle killed me.
Yeah, like
especially if you had 20 minutes to do it.
Yeah, and like I can, and the thing is, you made a comment, and I am gonna. This is a kind of facetious response to something you said, Chaos, but don't take it like maliciously. Yeah, there was not enough blood at the crime scene because most of it was all over the artwork in the Louvre.
Yeah,
like,
actually,
fuck.
The way that guard responded to the one painting being in danger when it was already damaged.
The thing is, the paintings all have a glass cover on them.
Yeah.
They're not. In the book, it is explained he wrote on the glass cover, not on the painting itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, of course, he wouldn't destroy a classic artwork. What the fuck? And also, why did they need a black light to see blood on it? Like, it's fresh blood. It should be clearly visible.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of that made no sense. It looked pretty, it looked good, but it made no sense.
I'd make a joke about other fluids, but...
Yeah, you kind of get that impression, don't you?
I kind of get it. I kind of got the feeling though, if he's had like time to do all this stuff before he died, that Silas isn't really a good killer, is he?
No, it's like, and years ago I was talking about this film with someone, and they passed the comment, and I'm going to repeat the joke because I quite like it. It's, I didn't know there were any Pollock paintings at the Louvre. Which, if you get the joke, you get the joke. I'm not going to explain it. But, yeah. And also, why do you need a symbologist to recognize the Vitruvian Man?
Yeah.
That did confuse me.
Like, even if you don't know who drew the Vitruvian Man, even if you don't know it's called the Vitruvian Man, you know what that is.
Everyone knows who the hell drew that.
Yeah, there's a reason that there's so many meme versions of it.
It's literally on the euro coin in Italy.
Yeah.
Like,
I forgot about that. Of course.
Yeah. Like this movie is very clearly, and the book is very clearly made for an American audience.
Yeah.
For it being made for an American audience, I wasn't sure if I was impressed or confused by how much of the film was non-English.
There was something in that. There was something, and it jogged my memory of from mentioning that they were in the military. That there was something that I was said, and I put a pin in it because it's because it's in the conversation that he has with Ian McKellen. But
yes,
just where I was thinking about something with something that was said, and I'm like, okay, this is deliberately targeted towards Americans because I know in certain other places it's different.
Yeah.
Yes, it is different. For example, in the British Air Force, but we'll get to that.
But once again, it's the problem of like the film openly acknowledging that symbols are cultural specific, but everything in the plot hinging on them having a secret universal meaning.
Yeah, which is just weird. Like, not even words have a secret universal meaning.
Yeah.
Like, dictionaries are descriptive, not prescriptive. Like,
not even colours have a universal meaning.
And there's also the moment where they're doing this, and she says to him, "You have an eidetic memory," Why is he
Yeah.
writing shit down if he's got an eidetic memory?
Yeah.
Like, why does he need to write stuff down?
He did actually sort of say not quite. He can remember most of what he sees, but he did sort of say
Yeah.
I have
not
to
quite.
say, that line, he says, not quite, I remember what I see. Well, so do most people who don't have quite severe brain damage.
Yeah.
Like, you're not special, mate. Like, so far, I am feeling, at this point in the movie, with them doing the puzzles and everything else, I have yet to grasp why Robert Langdon is even in it.
Yeah.
Like, it's so contrived. It's
See,
wow.
by the end, I was pretty sure the only reason Robert Langdon was there was that he had connections.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Also,
I
just
mean,
in general,
he gave some, and really, what's he do? He gave some background information, I suppose.
yeah.
What's
I will
going
also
on, but-
point out, Langdon knew that Sonia was a potential Grandmaster of the Priory, saw that Sonia positioned his body as the Vitruvian Man, and didn't immediately just fly to Italy and go look at the Last Supper.
Yeah.
Like, dude, like, how do you see those things? Claim to have the connection to them, and yet just, it's like he's leading Sophie on a wild goose chase.
Mm.
It's like left hand doesn't know what right hand's doing, blind leading the blind. Although there was one joke that wasn't in the movie that I was really annoyed at, that was in the books because it was good. When they're leaving the Louvre, see if you remember this, Scummer, when they're leaving the Louvre and he gets into the smart car, he drives the smart car originally in the book.
I see, because it was pointed out that they made a big deal with the smart car. Actually,
they did,
because
with it being a small car in Paris.
And I will say and I heard what was said earlier. I agree. It's one of the best bits of writing Dan Brown does in the book is that chase.
Yeah. And in the book, he gets in the car and the gears in the car start grinding. And there's this moment where she says, I thought you could drive. And he yells back at her, I drive an automatic. And I think for the rest of the world, the silent, I'm a fucking American, what did you expect, is implied in that moment.
Yeah. I did like...
Because at that point, everyone was still on manual except
I'm going to say something about the chase scene in the movie. It is one of the better points, as brought up. But you know what I was saying about this movie not quite being sure what it wants to be. Did anybody else, when watching like things like that, like certain bits, like the chase scene's a good example, get Bourne Identity vibes out of that?
Oh yeah, that chase scene in through the streets of Paris is one of those shot like a typical mid-aughts thriller
like
scenes for me.
Can I just point out that maneuver reversing through the streets, Dom Toretto would have been proud to pull that off.
Yeah.
I got definitely vibes of that chasing the banged out old Mini Cooper from the Bourne Identity from that thing. So it's
Okay,
I definitely got that kind of vibes.
So, but since we're going somewhat chronologically, there is a scene that I have to highlight as being like a scene where the score and the cinematography like mesh together great, and it's definitely a highlight for me. But hold on, I need to find the correct banner.
Hans Zimmer does it again. Oh no! Okay, yeah.
So they content warning for self-harm.
Oh boy.
But the scene with Silas self-flagellating in front of the cross.
That was one of the few scenes in the movie where the hand of the composer was not like waving at you, like didn't feel really like you're not supposed to notice the backing track. That's one of the few scenes in the movie where I didn't.
That's funny
I genuinely
because
feel like Yeah.
No, and that's funny because it's one of the scenes where I did. I was like, "Oh wow, this really fits really well." Good
Yeah, no,
job, Zimmer.
but that's what I mean. Like, I notice backing tracks in movies when the score doesn't quite meet what's on screen, or when the score is being too heavy-handed.
Yeah.
So if I don't notice it, that's a good thing. I didn't notice it in that scene. But as we've come on to Silas, let's talk about Opus Dei, because we skipped over all the scenes about them so far.
Yeah.
They exist. They are a ultra-conservative Catholic sect with what is it? They were a favourite of, I think, John Paul's.
Oh, I think so. Yeah.
It's like they had papal approval or whatever to exist.
They are a fairly. I mean, they in terms of historically, they are a fairly recent Catholic.
I think.
Sect, so
I think they've got about 80,000 members presently, but the Opus Dei and the Priory of Sion are both actual groups that exist.
Yeah, and I will say, if you ignore the deliberate othering and the deliberate presentation of them as the horror antagonist in this movie, it's not a fair representation of them, but it does represent them reasonably well. Like, there's nothing you could say about them other than if you said they're all albinos trying to kill people, I'd have a problem. But if you said, they perform self-flagellation, they are ultra-Catholic, those are all facts.
Now, I don't think they actually do self-flagellation. Now, the things about them putting
only the zealots really do it, the extremes, but
they do the corporal mortification thing, with the belt around the legs, although they don't quite do it to the same extreme that Silas does it in this movie. And this is obviously the big thing, and this is again can't really blame the people who made the movie over this way, that this is because this is from the source material once again. One thing Opus Dei does not have is monks, and that's kind of how Silas is portrayed. They do not have monks.
But in the book, it is explained that Silas is not actually a monk; he's just a follower who uses a monk's habit to get into places. It's a disguise. It's not actually what he wears on a day-to-day basis. So again, it's a much more even-handed presentation of Opus Dei than it is of paganism. Is this book and this movie? Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny, seeing as how everyone who's been banning it was banning it for being so anti-Catholic.
I mean, these are the same people who banned Billy Joel for being anti-Catholic. So
I'd actually say that the film does more of a job, I think, of making the Catholic Church look sinister in a certain respect than the book does. And I'll get onto that a bit later, I suppose, when we talk about some of the differences. But there is a point I definitely want to make.
Yeah, I feel like the film almost presents Opus Dei as the extreme militarist arm of the Catholic Church, whereas the book kind of goes out of its way to present Opus Dei as very much its own thing that just happens to currently have the approval of and the ear of the current Pope and or a high-up cardinal. So it's a difference, but I can see why they took what it was and made it bigger, because you need a villain. And they're the closest thing to a villain this movie has.
Yeah, well, there's sort of an addition in the film that does not exist in the book, around the people involved with Opus Dei and the sort of group of high-ranking church people. That's a pure addition from the film that is not from the book.
I think one thing I will say that I took from this is that this film really hammers home the message that the dangerous part of religion is zealotry. Like, on all sides, like, the zealot is the dangerous person.
Yeah. And that is,
whether that's
a good
Opus Dei,
message.
the Zealotrous police officer, the Zealotrous Grail hunter. If you are a zealot for anything, that's dangerous. And this film's really good at hammering that message home.
That is kind of the. I mean, I think there is a theme running through this. Yeah, it is like because there's zealotry on numerous sides here, and that seems to be what's driving the people who are the villains within this.
And
for the record, Mark, no, I'm not nursing it. I've just finished it.
And in keeping with the theme of the the real danger is the zealotry, is the fact that the only Grail Knight who finds the Grail is the beat cop of history.
Yeah, and I do love how they twisted how that was twisted though to be his father was a beat cop. He considered himself an honourable man, because that's one of those American European things of there's nothing generally wrong in Europe with being a beat cop.
Yeah,
it's like you're a cop, you're doing your job. There's unless you're more so recently there's been a moral aspect to that. But again, even that's influenced by America and what goes on in America. But in 2006, being a beat cop was a perfectly adequate day job. Like, no one would have, you'd have probably got a thank you and you'd have been reasonably well respected in the community if you were a beat cop. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I mean, you were a very respected person in the community. The local beat cop generally, was very respected in the community. Now, maybe because you don't really have like policemen who necessarily walk the beat or whatever like they used to. But that's a whole.
I mean, you do where I live, but they walk around in pairs, and there's a reason for that.
PCSOs go around in pairs, or certain parts of where I'm from, fours.
Oh no, actual beat cops walk around in pairs where I live, as do the big dogs.
And that's once again another indication of another example of where the text of this film is undercutting what the plot big plot subtext is trying to push.
Observation. I've just made a statement that says things were different in 2006. Certain symbols, such as being a police officer, meant something different in 2006 to now. This movie wants me to believe that the same symbol has existed for 800 years unchanged.
Yeah. Also, when this film came out, I was like 4.
Yeah.
So I remember being young and hearing about it, but obviously no one lets a 5-year-old watch the Da Vinci Code.
No. I mean, to be fair, my parents probably would have, but they wouldn't have known what I was watching.
Yeah.
But a couple of things. There was a little gag in there in the cinematography of the chase scene, where when she reverses the car, did anyone spot the poster on the wall?
No.
The poster on the wall was for Les Mis, and then at the end of the scene, it immediately cut to Silas getting out of the prison. And I just thought that was a fantastic little nod, and I had to comment on that.
There were actually several Les Mis posters popped up throughout the film right before Silas did.
Yeah. Like, he's quite clearly, like, his entire theme is that he's a prison escapee. Like...
Well, yeah.
But I do have a very serious question. The fleur-de-lis is a reasonably common symbol, especially in France.
Yeah.
How the fuck do you find something with a fleur-de-lis on it and immediately jumped to, there's a secret society protecting the Holy Grail.
How do you sign something with the fleur-de-lis in France?
Yeah.
And there's
And also the thing is, like, once again, the fleur-de-lis is another example of a symbol that's had a lot of different meanings over time. Because yes, it was part of a royal art, noble iconography and various crests, but they also used it to brand prisoners, I think, during the Revolution.
Yep, it has also been a symbol of the Virgin Mary in the past. It has also just been a symbol of France. It's on multiple British coats of arms.
If you go and obviously you go to certain parts in the Americas, like fleur-de-lis, you're going to find that in Quebec, because the French have. You go to Louisiana, the same thing.
You'll find it.
You ever seen the American football team in New Orleans Saints? Their logo is the fleur-de-lis.
Yeah, I tell you what. Yeah, and I tell you what. I had the option when. Put a content warning up, please, for what I'm about to say.
Okay, hold on.
Content warning: death of a parent. Not graphic. When I was choosing the coffin for my mum, the original coffin design had fleur-de-lis on the handle, and we had to ask for them to be changed to roses. And I remember looking at the book of the coffins and saying to my dad, "Do you like this box?" And he said, "Yes, but I don't like the handles." And I took it back, looked at it and said, "Yeah, she wasn't French. Can we have something different?" Like, that's a conversation that happened. And, so the fleur-de-lis is everywhere. It's ubiquitous. Yeah. It's to the point it means it's meant so much, so often, it literally means nothing anymore.
And it's, I will just say it's not exclusively a French thing either. They are used on some crests and coats of arms in the United Kingdom. Lithuania, it's a big thing. It's Italy. You ever look at the coat of arms of the city of Florence? Is a fleur-de-lis.
Yeah.
Duchy of Parma, same thing. It's a very, very, very common symbol.
I think as well that the criticism in relation to the fleur-de-lis here, where it's like it feels disconnected, I think that also is part of a broader criticism I have of this film. The sections of it felt like they flowed nicely, and sections of it felt like a slideshow of, we need to show you this, we need to show you this, we need to show you this.
Yeah, it was like the movie sort of goes exposition dump, cool bit, contrived bit, Deus Ex Machina, exposition dump, cool bit. That's kind of it's just like, even in the chat we've got Mark Caesar saying, looking at the fleur-de-lis, I've got to wonder why it hasn't been used by the marijuana smoking population. He's got a point. It looks very similar.
Yeah, actually I can see that.
And this is and for a character whose literal first words in the movie are symbols change over time and mean different things in different contexts, to go from fleur-de-lis in a French, like a Frenchman owning a key with a fleur-de-lis on it, to Priory of Sion and the Holy Grail is a fucking leap.
Yeah.
Yeah, even if Lee was his only friend, that would have been a leap.
Yeah. Like, if we presume Lee is his only friend in France. But even if he wasn't, like, that's a hell of a leap. That is, yeah.
And also the amount of emphasis that was put on the rose line.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because that was my next point. I'm going to drink while you talk.
Yeah.
Go on, Chaos. Go.
So I see the amount of information I have about the rose line is relatively limited. However, the way that it's set out for the purpose of the film makes it sound like some big conspiracy and not just some sort of useful mechanism historically.
Yeah, it's just a line of latitude. That's literally all it is. Latitude, longitude, longitude. It's long. It goes down.
And it was. I think the other thing is that the way that it was shown, especially how it went through a holy building, suggested it had been tampered with by
yeah, or the holy building had been built there deliberately.
Yeah, and the other thing was that because the Priory of Sion had apparently literally gone down and put that note of like the Job quotes.
We'll get there.
But just referencing that they did that, it suggests that it was tampered with by the Priory of Sion, despite the fact that to the Priory of Sion, this was a super sacred thing they weren't supposed to tamper with. So the story can't even get its own lore around the extra things it added to this line, right? And so that just...
my understanding is all that line is that before, obviously before Britain sort of like kind of became the dominant power and just started establishing where all the prime meridians were, that was a prime meridian. That was, which that London just decided to make theirs like Greenwich or whatever, So
yeah, like literally all it is a proto Greenwich Mean Time line. That's literally all it is. But what I want to do, I want to hang over to Ring, because I am sure Ring has a lot of thoughts about Job 38:11.
That's one of the few Bible verses I don't recognize.
Yeah. So it's literally, to be fair, it is the line is accurate.
Yeah.
It's I think it's the King James version they use, but it's accurate. But it doesn't mean anything like what they're presenting it to mean. And it's clearly being frigging shoehorned in there with a hammer and a spanner.
Well, I mean, it hasn't. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time someone's taken a Bible verse out of context specifically as a fuck you.
Channel punching bag. But yes, the channel punching bag did that in the last book. The last enemy that shall be defeated is death.
I won't see. I wouldn't. I didn't even immediately go there. I just. I immediately went to something Samuel L. Jackson in Pulp Fiction when you said that.
No, see, I immediately went there because I remember reading that last book by the channel punching bag and going, "What the fuck do you think you're, Dan Brown?" But yeah, also Langdon doesn't know these basic crusade history dates. He claims in 2006 that the Crusades happened 1,000 years ago. Now, even allowing for creative license and a little bit of fudging because it's idiomatic, no. I just, no. And I saw Scummer sigh, so I'm going to let Scummer take over this.
No, I'm trying to remember that. I'm going to try and remember the dates of the First Crusade here, but it hasn't been 1,000 years yet. I knew that much.
The First Crusade was
1096 to 1099. Sorry, I did have to Google it again, but I knew it was in the late 1000s. So
yeah,
okay. I don't know. I suppose in a way I could let it go. If we are gonna round up to the nearest thousand, if we are going to allow people to round up to the nearest thousands or something, we could maybe give them. We can cut them some slack. But
look, I'm going to say something, but I'm going to wait till Ring's finished drinking.
For a character who is a historian,
yes. Again, okay, I'm going to say something. If that's how long Robert Langdon calls 1,000 years, I hate to see what he calls 8 inches.
Well, he rounds up. We know that much.
Also,
Exactly.
also, like, so, history, like, dubious historicity aside,
The entire history of the Crusades given is wrong as well.
but here's the thing. If, like, even in the timeline of events that the film gives us, it doesn't make any fucking sense.
Yeah,
Go
even
on.
if we grant their history of the Crusades that they describe is correct, they still fuck it up.
Yeah. So, so in the whole, the Knights, the Priorius Scion became the Knights Templar, and they crusaded in the Holy Land to find the Grail. Well, here's the thing. In like if you take the the history that is presented by, like, just out of an internal consistency standpoint, the Grail was in France the entire fucking time.
Yeah. To be fair, the Grail was right fucking there the entire time.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, the Knights, the Knights Templar didn't have to go crusading to get the Grail because the Grail was already in fucking France.
Yeah, they already
because
had it.
It was the St. Clair family, and yeah. So basically, this entire book and entire movie just wastes all your time, and it was completely
well,
irrelevant.
and the sarcophagus was already in France because Mary Magdalene moved to France.
Yeah, I think the suggestion is that Saunier, when he became curator of the Louvre, and that was done, put the sarcophagus under there. That I think that's the implication they're trying to give, but it doesn't work because logic.
Well, because the sarcophagus was originally in the Rosslyn Chapel, according to the.
Yeah. Again, danger of zealots. He kills the nun.
Yeah.
This thing of the teacher. I got really grossed out, really just trauma vibes from when he's sat in the car and he says, "Are you the teacher?" and the guy kisses him. Like, that was a really gross. Like, that's Garden of Gethsemane on its head with way too much. Like, that was trying too hard, that scene. But I want to talk about, and I'm probably the only one who picked up on this, or at the very least the only one who identified with it. There's a line where when they're in the back of the truck, where Sophie says to Langdon, where they're talking about belief in God. And Langdon responds with, "I was raised a Catholic." And Sophie calls that shit out. And she says, "That's not an answer." I've been that person who responds with, "I was raised a Catholic."
I'd like to point out that certain levels of atheist discourse, and this isn't even the lowest levels of atheist discourse, are still behind where Dan Brown was when he wrote the Da Vinci Code.
15 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, the movie is 16 years old. I think the book came out a couple of years before it.
Yeah, it's like 2003.
Yeah. So, like, okay. But just for the record, that's a very common thing you will hear people say. And I'm going to ask you, from the bottom of my heart as an ex-Catholic, please don't call people out on that. It's really uncomfortable. Like, please don't call me out on that. Like, that's my excuse for, like when I go to funerals and shit and people talk and someone will inevitably turn to me and be like, "You're quiet, don't you believe in this?" And my response is, "I was raised Catholic." That's my get out clause. Like, please don't take that away from me. I've just seen Mark Caesar put, let's think for a moment, if I found a sarcophagus, I sure as fuck wouldn't open it. That would... I feel like the entire planet's population of archaeologists would have a disagreement with that statement.
Yeah.
Something British History Museum.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, like, you open a sarcophagus to see what's inside. Like, that's the first thing you do. Like, you bring in a priest if you're superstitious first, but you definitely, like, open it.
So
you need to know what's in there. Even if it's just people
So,
soup,
of course,
you need to know.
If you really want to screw with an archaeologist, you ask them how long is it before grave robbing before grave robbing becomes archaeology.
You don't ask an archaeologist that question unless you offer them a strong drink.
Okay, I got to hold up even though we're not talking about this particular movie, I'm going to point this out. I did force myself through the Angels and Demons movie a few years back again as well. Ewan McGregor says the same goddamn thing to Tom Hanks. Do you believe in God? He says, I was raised a Catholic. He said, that's not what I asked you. I asked if you believed in God.
That's one of Dan Brown's favourite lines. It really is.
It's and again, this is something, maybe we'll put a pin in this about things. I mentioned this before we went on stream, didn't we? About
it's a running joke. I think that
Dan
gag
Brown comes back to a lot of the time.
I think that gag is in The Lost Symbol and in Inferno as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't
like that gag follows Robert Langdon around.
I got to admit, I gave up on Dan Brown by the time that Inferno was. I got to a certain point.
But yeah, that was just that's one of Dan Brown's favorite jokes, and I know he's calling it out, but please don't, because we need that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's how we get through the holidays without arguing with extended family members. Please don't take that away from us. But yeah, anyway.
Yeah. You guys have got enough guilt having been raised as Catholics, so you know.
Yeah, exactly. I feel guilty enough without you calling that shit out to my face. I also want to go back to the comment that when he's on the plane, the cardinal passes about Opus Dei. He says, and I quote, "We are not cafeteria Catholics."
Yeah.
Yes.
I still remember the Apostles' Creed, and I haven't been to church. The last time I went to church was my mother's funeral 8 years ago. And before then, I hadn't been for at least 5 years. I still remember the Apostles' Creed. There's no such thing as a cafeteria Catholic. You're either Catholic or you're not. And if you're Catholic, you know you're a Catholic. I feel like that's a very American comment to make, because Americans are used to living in a society where
just as the American
just disappeared. Yeah. But they're used to living in a society that is defined by being multiple denominations of Christianity. The whole point of Catholicism is that it's one universal apostolic church. Everyone is the same. But even American Catholics try and make themselves different to Catholics. And it's like, no, if you're Catholic, you're Catholic. That's the point of being Catholic.
See, I've previously heard someone make a comment about like New York Catholics versus Texas Catholics, and I was like, a Catholic's a Catholic, and I grew up in the environment I did.
I mean, I grew up in like before the most recent update to the Vatican documents. It's like, no, Catholics are Catholics are Catholic. The entire point of being Catholic is that you can go anywhere in the world, and if you walk into a Catholic church, you don't have to speak the language it's been given in to be able to understand what's happening in the Mass because you've heard it every week of your life and you know it by heart. Like, I can probably still stand in a Catholic church where the Mass is being given in English and recite the priest's lines along with them. Like, there'll be a few differences because I was raised in the older Catholic tradition in the late 90s, and I think that was out of date even then, but I was raised in an older, sort of more orthodox thing. But Catholic is Catholic is Catholic.
Yeah.
And that was a really weird comment, and I was just like, clearly this was written by an American. Like, that is taking the way Protestants look at each other, like, you're too orthodox, you're too liberal, you know, you don't, you know, that was taking that and applying it to Catholicism, and that does not work.
I could see somebody like Bill Donahue from the Catholic League saying something like that, though.
Oh, I've heard.
But you have to understand.
I could picture him saying something along those lines.
I could, but you also have to understand that Catholicism, I'm going to be very careful how I word this, and I don't mean to offend anyone. I'm just drawing a comparison to try and highlight. From the inside, the approach to Catholicism by Catholics is very similar to being an ethnic Jew. You can be ethnically Catholic without being a practicing Catholic. This is why there is a differentiation between practicing and non-practicing Catholic. You can be a practicing Catholic, you go to church, you pray, you believe.
Yeah.
You can be a non-practicing Catholic, which means that you were baptized in the Catholic Church, but either you don't believe or you don't go to church. Or you can be what is generally known as an apostate. You can essentially excommunicate yourself by stating publicly that I do not believe in the Catholic Church. You don't need the Pope's permission for that. You can do it. But you are still on the books of the Catholic registry and you will still be counted as a Catholic.
Now, I'm trying to remember who it was in the community. I think it might have been Jen Aldridge. I can't remember. So, Jen, if Jen Aldridge listens, if it's not you, I apologise. But I believe she actually had to try and deliberately get herself excommunicated.
Yeah, she did. And if memory serves, I think she actually had.
It was Jen. Yeah, it was Jen. Was it? I was right.
The way Catholicism works is they changed the rules about 15 years ago that said once you're baptized Catholic, you're Catholic and there's no way out. Before then, you used to be able to write to your local bishop and ask to be struck from the official record of Catholics in the diocese, which basically meant that a line was drawn through your name in the baptismal book of the church, which meant you said you were no longer Catholic and you didn't want to be counted. They changed that and then stopped doing that. I wrote to my bishop when I was about 13 and said, I don't want to be Catholic. I'm not taking my confirmation. Strike me from your records. I never got a reply because I was in that weird period of time where we didn't know whether it was accurate or not. So to this day, I do not personally know if I am still on the books for the Catholic Church or not.
I
Despite being self-declared polytheist.
I'm going to just say, I think it's terrible, like any sort of like organisation, like, you know, any religious organisation, like dishonestly boosting their numbers like that.
Look,
you'd never catch atheists doing that. Hello, American atheists. How are you? How are you?
It's not only that, but it's like, you know that saying about the mafia? It's not the getting in, it's the getting out. Where the fuck do you think they learned it from?
Yeah,
they learned it from the Catholic Church.
So
I've got one for you, Noodle. I saw an interview with, I think he was a bishop, and he was talking about how he sometimes struggles to admit that other Catholics are actually Catholic when they hold such different views to him because he was a professional exorcist.
Oh, yeah, so he's what we call one of the wacky Vatican Catholics. There are levels of being Catholic, okay? You can be non-practicing, you can be practicing, and you can be one of them. And we all look at them and think, why don't you just go join a right-wing American Protestant church? Because that's clearly where you belong.
See, this is what I was watching. Like he's not a Catholic. I don't even know what he is. He's a con man, but a guy called Ring may be familiar with. A guy called Bob Larson who does exorcisms and whatever. And you have I've seen clips of a Catholic exorcist looking at him and saying, "This guy's a fucking whack job." I'm like, okay, then you know the guy's a whack job. If a Catholic exorcist is calling you that.
Yeah.
It's like you are technically not a Catholic from the first moment you publicly declare yourself not a Catholic. But you are still on their records, you are still part of their thing. Even if you sign a census and say you are not Catholic, the Catholics are still counting you in their numbers. And there's no way to get around that.
Do you know what? I think this is the whole reason I was never baptized. I'll tell you why, because I think I don't know. I think because up in Scotland, where I was born at the time, a lot of the churches were Catholics, and my dad was dead against having me baptized into the Catholic Church, which is really why he was funny about that, I don't know, because there was plenty of Presbyterian Protestant type churches in Scotland, for goodness sake. But in a certain way, I'm not fussed because it's good. No Christian group can claim me.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, but no, I needed to get that out there because there's like that one line from Robert Langdon of "I was raised a Catholic."
Yeah.
Reveals so much about Dan Brown's understanding, but also lack of understanding of what it is to have been raised Catholic.
Yeah.
Especially combined with the cafeteria Catholic line from earlier. There will always be zealots and people who really take it too far. But generally, being Catholic, it's like claiming you're ethnically people say they're Catholic in the same way Americans say they're Native American. No, you're not. You just fucking a 2% result on your ancestry DNA saying that you're part of some tribe does not make you Native American. Okay?
Yeah.
It's that kind of it's a cultural thing more than anything. Much like the Church of England, so far as I can tell from looking at it from the outside, just looks like a coffee morning. It just looks like you people just get together and eat cake and drink coffee. It doesn't appear to be that religious.
I think you've just debunked yourself there. I think you've just
How have I
debunked
done
yourself. Well, you said there's no such thing as cafeteria Catholics. I present to you the Church of England.
They don't claim to be Catholics. They are very specifically not claiming to be Catholic.
Yeah, but if you want a definition and look at a church that is like a cafeteria Catholic church, look at the fucking Church of England.
To be fair, if you wanted a definition of what a cafeteria Catholic is, that is the Church of England, but also they're not claiming to be that.
I think Ring is going to want to bring it back because we've gone on a massive tangent.
Yeah.
So, shall we move on to Langdon and Ian McKellen?
Are we skipping Sophie's Healing Hands?
That was a film thing. I'm pretty damn sure this was a film thing.
No, she did it in the book as well.
She did do it in the book, did she?
Yeah, she massaged his temples and suddenly he was magically not traumatized.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got Lee. Now, I want to talk about Lee's test of honor because there's 3 Brits in the chat.
Even though I have to admit, I kind of liked this.
And let me say first, once again, this is an example of how symbols and such are culturally specific.
I am going to point something out. That if you put me and Ring in a room and asked us to pass this test of honor, Ring would be the one who passed.
Okay, yeah.
Because the first question, will I serve tea or coffee? Now, even in the dark, I would ask for coffee. Ring?
Tea.
Milk or lemon?
I'd actually I'd fail on question 2. I'd say lemon.
Actually, I think a lot of British
depends on the
people
tea.
would fail on the second. Actually, I do think a lot of English people would fail on the second one because most of us don't drink fucking Earl Grey.
Yeah, most of us
Yeah,
don't drink Earl Grey.
I feel like
next
I'm weird that
question-
I would pass all 3.
Yeah, no. I will say the question should have been, does the milk or tea go into the cup first?
Yeah.
But that's how you start a war.
That's, let's just put it this way: if Langdon had said, "I make the tea in the microwave," he wasn't getting in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that third question, my answer would simply have been, that's not for Harvard. That's for us.
Yeah, that would have probably passed as well, to be fair. Though I will say that third question immediately set me up to dislike Lee as a character. But that's because I'm working class northern and this is some guy getting poncy about the fucking Oxford-Cambridge boat race.
Yeah. See, I only know about that because at one point I was considering Cambridge.
So was I. But yeah, no.
So,
too posh for me.
So then the question is, in which year did a Harvard graduate last out a Rowan Oxford man at the Henley Regatta?
Surely such a travesty has never occurred.
Yeah.
Your heart is true. You may pass.
Yeah.
To be fair, that would be, but my reaction would be, I didn't know Harvard went in the boat race. That'd be my reaction as a northerner, which it'd probably pass as well.
He does. In I will say, because this is obviously like university jabs at one another here going on here. Because I said in the book there's which I thought was one of the funnier lines Dan Brown wrote was he mentions that he's graduating Oxford University, but then he says, like, just obviously because this is jab at Robert Langdon, he says, however, I did apply to Harvard as my safety school.
Safety school. Okay, so Native Atheist, rowing is literally the boat race. They put 4 people in a boat with a guy beating the drum and yelling at them, and they race down a river. And this is a big thing. Like, all the posh boys come out and wear their old school boaters and ties. And it's a big thing for the upper classes. The working classes sometimes watch it, but we do sort of. It's because the cricket's not on while we watch it. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Like,
if you watch it, it's to make fun of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, and they literally row. And a lot of Oxford and Cambridge rowers end up on the Olympic team for rowing for Britain.
And
because that's what that's for.
Do you want to know that famous man who rowed for Cambridge? They lost that year. Hugh Laurie.
The guy who, Hugh Laurie lost that year.
He rowed for Cambridge.
I feel like Stephen Fry takes the piss out of him for that, but that might be me misremembering.
Well, they're both Cambridge guys, weren't they?
The closest American example would probably be like the Red Sox Yankees rivalry.
No, this would be like if Harvard and Princeton had a varsity football match. That's what it's the equivalent of.
Well, Harvard and Yale would be, because they're the ones that don't
Harvard
like
and
each
Yale.
other. Yeah, Harvard and Yale don't like each other.
Or like the Army Navy football game.
Yes, actually, that's a better comparison.
That's a better, yeah.
I feel like the US military makes so many good comparisons to the UK upper classes. It's funny.
Yes, because what do you think it's based on?
I just want to give you, if you guys don't know this, now you introduced this character Lee. I'm going to give you some useless trivia on him here. His name is Sir Lee Teabing, and Lee is not spelled L-E-E. It's spelled L-E-I-G-H. Okay.
Yeah.
Teabing is an anagram of Bagent. Now, Richard Lee, Michael Bagent, wrote a book that got a lot of attention in 1982 called Holy Blood and the Holy Grail. This is pretty much what the Da Vinci Code is based on. This whole crap history, conspiracy theory kind of thing.
Yeah.
So there was a book called Holy Blood, Holy Grail that caused a bit of a stink in the early 80s, and it got a little bit of and ironically, they tried to sue Dan Brown for like stealing their ideas, and I'm like, oh, what do you mean stealing their ideas? You claimed your shit was history, and I'm like, and
Yeah.
if anything, they should have sent Dan Brown a Christmas card because their book started selling a lot again up when the Da Vinci Code was released. But there's a little bit of trivia on the naming of the character.
Of course, we do have, the trope of the, that is prevalent in, historical secret MacGuffin movies, where you have the fringe crackpot, giving the exposition dump, but in this one, he's portrayed as a respectable historian.
Mm.
I'm sorry, an Oxford historian living in northern France in a chateau is not respectable. He's got all the trappings of respectability, but if he was truly respectable, he'd still be living in London or Oxford, and he'd still be publishing, and he'd probably be teaching, even with his disabilities. He is clearly an outcast. He's clearly pissed off a lot of people and has run to France to get away from the embarrassment of being viewed as a crackpot.
I will say, I think in the book he's explained that he does come from very old money, and he supposedly moved to France because he was pretty much become a grail hunter and decided to base himself in France. But
also, I will point out, any man who is so British, he won't let you into his house unless you say you want Earl Grey with lemon, is not someone who willingly moves to France.
Yeah. I did.
No.
I did think that the "Don't trust the French" line was a long time coming.
Yes, that line was at least 10 minutes late. The British French thing goes way back to the Black Prince.
Though I mean, for instance, okay, I'm in comparison to a much better secret history MacGuffin movie, National Treasure. Benjamin Gates is depicted as, a washout who can barely hold down any kind of pseudo-academic job because everyone thinks he's a crackpot.
Yes, but you have to remember, British people are very polite, so they wouldn't say that outright, but it is strongly implied.
But the movie gives this crackpot theory an air of respectability by having Langdon introduce him as an academic expert on the Holy Grail.
This is the man to go to for Grail history almost.
Yeah.
It's
first of all, he's a graduate of Oxford, but clearly not a professor.
Yeah.
So dude's way too attached to his alma mater. Second of all, right? Shit, I forgot what I was going to say. I need to slow down on the gin. No, second of all, right? He's just, the things he's presenting are so, look, interdisciplinary historical study and learning an interdisciplinary approach is a thing. It's definitely a thing. But the way he does it, if there is a historian anywhere in the world who looks at that monologue he gives and thinks that is an acceptable, even first draft of a article on this topic, please go back and demand a refund for your undergraduate fees.
Yeah.
Because no.
And
no.
Well, and also there's the fact that Langdon only gives the feeblest of pushback on this whole,
Yeah. I will point out as well the idea that a Harvard professor of symbology is arguing with an Oxford historian who it's probably strongly implied is a Don or similar or of a similar Oxford rank. Really? Okay, neither of you at this point are actually in your lane.
Yeah.
Like the historians talking about art history, like, dude, fuck. And the symbologist who doesn't really have a real job and wrote a fucking weird book is trying to correct an Oxford Don. Like, dude. Because I think it is strongly implied that Lee would be a Don.
I gotta be honest,
but I don't think he is.
I'm definitely feeling a bit bad for Sophie in this in the middle of this.
Do you know what the problem? Do you know what Sophie's problem is? She's surrounded by middle-aged white men.
Yeah.
That's her entire problem in this movie.
And speaking as the middle-aged white man in the room here, I'm like,
if you'd have left her alone for 10 minutes with a cup of coffee, she'd have cracked this without ever having to leave the Louvre.
So, are we going to get into...
Yes, let's. Boys will be boys. Off you go.
You go first, Ring.
In the whole... I'm going to take the pin out from the military comment. The highest ranked members of the military, U.S. military, don't have chevrons. Chevrons are only an enlisted thing.
Mm-hmm.
And even and you don't get at once you hit, heck, it's not even collecting chevrons all the way up in the enlisted. It only goes up to 3 chevrons, 3 rockers, and then stuff gets added in the middle. And once again, it's tapping into the whole there are all these different points in the movie where the text of the movie is telling us symbols mean different things to different cultures. They have cultural, spatial, and temporal significance that changes through the ages and where you go. But now that we're getting into the conspiracy theory part of it, it goes to the everything has a secret ancient meaning that always means this, where we have the thematic the two thematic sides of this plot, the subtext and the text, coming in direct conflict with each other so very obviously.
The least they could have done is given us some evolutionary psychology converging symbolism bullshit.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to say something about that bit as well. I put a pin in it earlier about, we were sort of saying how that you could tell this was kind of marketed towards Americans. And it talks about military, they talk about military films. Now, okay, so he's doing the whole, the blade, chalice stuff, and he's pointing out the whole thing of, look, so this is how male dominated it is. Look at uniforms, sort of like that. Where some, you think like the stripes are an NCO hat, a non-commissioned.
Yeah, the chevrons.
Yep, okay, chevrons. In the British Army, I can tell you, those are the stripes go like that. So I'm pretty sure that's universal through that, and maybe the Royal Air Force. I don't think the Royal Navy have chevrons like that, but the British Army, tell you,
So you're saying the British. So you're saying the British military is full of pussies.
Full of pussies that are always bailing the Americans out of the shit they cause themselves. But hey,
Yeah. I only heard the back end of that, but I am going to cut in with, well, at least they're not full of people who claim they won a war they didn't actually get involved in until 6 months before the end.
But so so your thoughts on the whole?
Look, it seems to make logical sense, and I can see why people accepted it uncritically. When you've been told this film is based on research, or the book was based on research, and then you're given something, people like a simple answer. But that was just, look, no. Just no.
Yeah, it was also giving...
I'm not even into symbology. I don't know shit about those symbols. But those are not the symbols for male and female anyway.
Yeah.
You will be more familiar with the circle with either an arrow or a cross on it, dependent.
Yeah.
Those are definitely more akin to Venus and Mars. Although, again, just no.
It felt like an attempt at bioessentialist psychology.
Yeah. Look, okay, human beings have been drawing dicks since the first human being noticed they had one. That's just how human beings behave. That's like, yeah. But the idea that this is the womb and this is the dick is like, no. No. What are you suggesting? That a square is missionary position? Like, what are you actually suggesting with that statement?
Yeah.
Like, because if a womb goes like this and a dick goes like this, and you put them together so they go like this and turn it on its side, that's a square and that's missionary position. Like, well, what are you suggesting?
It's suggesting that vanilla people are a bit square.
And
perfect timing with that.
So you've gotten into the bit where they claim that the two symbols make the pentagram, which will make what they claim is the pentagram, but it's really just the Star of David.
Okay, first of all, this plus this does not equal a pentagram, it equals a Star of David.
Yeah.
Let's just clarify that, as we said earlier.
And
also,
even then,
I just no.
Wait.
No.
Hold on. I have to make this joke. So if male plus female equals Star of David, does that mean David was bi confirmed?
Well, David was bi confirmed, but let's not go there. I think I've already pissed off enough people with my comparing being culturally Catholic to being ethnically Jewish on this stream to carry on. But yes, David was bi confirmed. Most ancient men were.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's talk about the Last Supper.
Oh, the Last Supper.
Yeah.
This is, first of all, what he's describing when he tells her it's stomata, the eye sees what it wants to see. No, what you're describing there, dude, is the Mandela effect.
Yeah.
Second of all, stomata, if you have a stomata, it's because you have a literal growth or blind spot in your eye. It's not because you looked at something and your preconceived notions made you not look at it properly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's just on his claiming what that is. The actual okay, The Last Supper is weirdly put together, but it's fucking Da Vinci. You've got to give some grace.
Yeah.
Okay, it's Da Vinci. The dude knew what he was doing. But I just... It's not even, like, accurate to how The Last Supper is presented biblically.
Yeah.
I distinctly remember being taught Jesus took a cup from the table.
Yeah.
That's the line in Mass. That's the line everywhere.
Yeah.
A cup from the table. Now, it doesn't mean there was only one cup on the table. It says he took basic... Dude reached out for the nearest cup to him that had some wine in it and raised it. So what happened? That's why there's more than one cup when you go up for the Eucharist in a Catholic Mass.
Though, oh my God. So...
I'm also concerned about what Mr. Oxford graduate historian calls hints of a bosom. Because that's a fucking ironing board.
Yeah. Also, does that, like, on the whole, you know, the Last Supper, you know, the Holy Grail was Mary Magdalene, you know, take this cup, this, you know, this is my blood. Does that imply that the Last Supper was a gangbang?
Well, I mean, given the washing of everyone's feet, which was just a bunch of hand jobs.
Well, that's definitely kinky, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you've got, you know, there are certain circles on the internet that you can go to that shall remain nameless for their own protection, where the idea that Jesus was actually a dominant with 12 submissive men at his beck and call is... He was a service dog for 12 subs is generally accepted. It's kind of the whole thing with The Last Supper. Look, The Last Supper is a weird ass painting. It is a weird ass painting. There's like hands in the wrong place and all kinds of shit. It's like, but and what he describes in The Last Supper is, I mean, generally you can see that, but like this whole thing about the disembodied hand that didn't make it into the movie but is in the book, I don't see any disembodied hand on The Last Supper, and I'm looking at it right now. You know, the colors are not inverted on Jesus and that other character. That other character is wearing green and orange. Jesus is wearing red and blue.
When you have to alter it for the film, you might not be making the point you think you are.
I want to very quickly answer Doc Fearsom's question in the chat.
I didn't want to draw attention to it because we're already being culturally insensitive enough.
Oh, I was just going to say they don't have throwing ninja stars, but according to Marjorie Taylor Greene, they have space lasers, which could be the Death Star of David.
Yes, but according to Marjorie Taylor Greene, they're lizards as well, so let's not go there.
Yeah.
You know, there's... I don't believe in censorship, but you can be open and thing without being brutally anti-Semitic. Like, you know.
If she was capable of thinking that was, but anyway.
Yeah.
Also, I feel like MTG would like how blatantly anti-Catholic this is, but she also
this movie is
But she also strikes me as the kind of fundy who won't have anything to do with Dan Brown because Dan Brown is demonic.
I just think, look, the problem is with this film and with the book, a lot of people are going to take what Dan Brown has said as, and excuse the pun, gospel.
Yeah.
And they're going to accept it uncritically. And it's one thing to enjoy a movie. It's another to be told this movie is based on the truth and you can believe it and you can carry on believing this. when basic, simple facts like the colours in a painting are wrong.
Yeah.
I
mean, I'll have to say, I mean, maybe I'll talk about this a bit later, but I could see the appeal of this book and the appeal of this particular conspiracy theory, though. I can see the appeal of it to people.
I think with this book as well, you have to understand this book came on the tail end of sort of the post-90s wave of feminism that called for the empowerment of the women and the empowerment of non-white, intersectional, LGBT empowerment across the board. That started in the early 90s and carried straight on through until the early 2000s. And you can't take this book out of that context. Do I think this book would have done as well if it was released in the 60s? No. Because the image of the feminine then was either the suburban housewife or the bra-burning feminist, neither of which are accurate or exist in reality. But this book would not have worked in that time period. This was, I don't want to say the right book, but kind of, this book was appropriate to the context it was released into.
And you also got to remember that I think it happened just ever so slightly after this book was released, but within a similar time period, you had some of the big scandals within the Catholic Church started coming out as well.
Yeah.
So you can see as people would have this tendency to think the kind of worst of the Catholic Church. This is one of those kind of things where I actually have to point some people out on some of the history that there is plenty of real shit the Catholic Church has done over the years. You don't need to make stuff up.
And you've got to understand as well, this film was released the year after John Paul II died.
Yeah.
That's an important aspect of the context as well.
Yeah, we got Ratzinger, didn't we? For a few years.
For me, the thing
no one liked Ratzinger at the start.
The thing that confuses me about how people can think this book is real is if you were to take at face value the influence the Opus Dei and the Priory of Sion have, and neither of those groups would want this book released, how was Dan Brown still alive to make the film or be influential in the film at all?
Okay, I'm gonna tinfoil hat for a moment. And I'm not saying I believe anything of what I'm about to say next. I'm just going to give you some context. In 2003, the Iraq War started. 2001, you had 9/11. John Paul had died the previous year, like around the time the book was released. You had all these things. You just had the millennium and the millennium bug and, the all of that. That culture, being around that culture, you'll remember Scummer, you'll probably remember as well, Ring. We were primed to believe every conspiracy that came along. Like, it was generally accepted in the early 2000s that, just every conspiracy under the sun. Elvis isn't dead. The moon landings were faked. Diana was murdered. Like, you name it.
9/11 was an inside job.
9/11 was an inside job, or the Saudis did it, or something. Like, not even that the Saudis did it, but you know what I mean. Like, 9/11 was an inside job. And we were all, there was this cultural, in the post-imperial world, I say that very specifically as in the post-British imperial world, there was this cultural bias towards believing conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
At the time. Late 2000s, we were all scared the world was going to end on midnight on New Year's Eve 1999 because the computers were all going to go crazy and kill us all.
Yeah.
Well, you had all the Nostradamus types coming out of the woodwork around them as well.
Yeah.
Oh, and
do you remember
Heaven's
the Age of
Gate.
Yeah.
Aquarius? Do you remember that? Yeah.
And I'll just say this. Can I get this little rant point in here right now? Look, people still looking at Nostradamus as some sort of prophecy. Dudes, just stop it, because look, there's all of those things he wrote down were very, very cryptic, could be interpreted in a whole bunch of ways. And there's out of like 400 or 500 of whatever of these things he wrote down, there's maybe half a dozen to 10 of these things that may possibly have come true, especially if you're interpreting something that's cryptic. Look, I'm sure the four of us here, we could write down 1,000 predictions of something that's going to happen in the future, and the law of averages is we're going to get a couple of them right.
Oh, I don't know. I have a pretty good track record.
Yeah, I think especially our group here would probably do better than average.
Yeah, given that we've got an ex-military analyst, a philosophy student, a historian, and a union man, we are going to have a better than average hit rate on most things. Because we look at the world and we see shit. No, the reason I say union man is because you are capable of looking at the world and seeing it how it is, and that is a skill. And that is a skill I deeply respect in you, Scummer. You look at the world and you can see it for what it is. So, the four of us will probably have a better than average hit rate. We sure as hell would do better than the toss of a coin. We'd do better than chance. But that doesn't mean we're psychic. It just means we pay attention to shit.
If we could do stuff really cryptically as well, we're going to have a huge batting average.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. If we can word things that there's like 6 different possibilities, like Liz will die or something.
Yeah.
Yes, which Liz?
Yeah.
Also, the whole wording things cryptically does, once again, that points to the big thematic disconnect of the Da Vinci Code, is where, words and symbols have multiple different meanings. But actually, no, there's a universal secret meaning that goes back to the dawn of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like the Da Vinci Code had 2 types of puzzle in it. The type of puzzle that you can't work out, and it was put in the plot to make them seem clever, despite the fact they shouldn't have been able to work it out either. And ones that are puzzles you give to year 3s.
Yeah. The Sun Daily crossword.
Yeah.
And I say the Sun specifically, but yeah. It's one of those things where we kind of... I've got a lot of notes on the second half of this film because I was annoyed. So I literally, one of my top notes though is Ian McKellen, of course.
Yeah.
So let's just give the man his due for that. I want to ask a serious, pragmatic, practical question. Okay. First of all, how big are Langdon's pockets? How do you fit a codex this big into an inside jacket pocket? Men, please respond. Also, aren't suit jacket pockets supposed to be stitched up so they keep the line of the jacket?
I was going to thinking in a suit you'd have very, very tiny pockets.
Yeah.
It's not that I often have occasions to wear a suit. I do own a suit. It's just that I very rarely have reason to break it out.
Okay. We've talked about the ahistoricity. If you want to find out what they're talking about when they say the godhood of Jesus being voted on, you need to Google the term Arian controversy, Arian. Start there. The Wikipedia page is quite good. I also... There's a line from Robert Langdon here that, as a historian, hurt me deeply. Like, in all of this movie, lots of it hurt me, but this cut me to the quick. Like, this took my heart and stamped on it. A symbologist, a man who claims to study conspiracy theories and things like that, claiming that there is no empirical evidence. Dude, first of all, you are not an empirical historian. Second of all, there's no historical evidence for anything any of you have said.
Yeah.
Third of all, do you even know what the word empirical means?
Also,
That hurt me deeply, because the first lecture you will get as a historian at undergraduate is on empirical history, and then you will get a series of 10 more lectures on different ways of looking at history that are all better than it.
But you see, Noodle, you didn't go to Harvard, though. He did, so...
No, I went to Leicester. Leicester, where I was taught that actually only using recorded history is fucking bullshit, because if you only look at recorded history, everyone is an old white literate man and no one else on the planet existed, and their washing up was done by magic by secret elves who they never paid attention to.
And also, out of the two, Harvard didn't find a dead king.
Yes.
Okay.
Harvard didn't find a dead king. Harvard doesn't have the guy who discovered DNA.
Okay. Well, who just...
I say discovered.
Yeah, I'm going to say... Can I just because I'm going to say this, I actually personally know the niece of Rosalind Franklin, so you have to be a little bit careful on this one. Okay.
Yeah, but
she's a personal friend of mine.
Yeah. There's also the thing of, we've all studied biblical language and the Bible to some extent, because we're all apostates to some extent. I would like to have a discussion about the phrase, the companion of the Savior.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the companion implies a romantic relationship, but also no.
Yeah.
But also, if the companion of the Savior is his wife, which is what's being said and is said explicitly in the book, I want to talk about his most loved companion, Lazarus.
So Jesus is now bi.
Get to that one.
You say Jesus is now bi, like it isn't a known Hebrew euphemism that washing someone's feet means giving them a hand job?
Yeah, and I will say as well, surrounding yourself with 12 big butch guys, at least two of whom were sailors. Dude had a type. Just saying.
This reminds me of a little inside joke going on a couple of years ago about sexy twink Jesus.
Yeah, sexy twink Jesus.
I want to preface this with that I mean it in humor, because I can see this being taken the wrong way. But the biggest plot hole in the Da Vinci Code is that due to having the Virgin Mary's genetics, Jesus was actually a trans dude and so couldn't impregnate anyone.
Also, another major plot hole. Please name for me a single woman, AFAB person in history before about the 1800s, or even a man for that matter, who was literate and wrote his own diary and didn't have a scribe to do it for him.
Yeah.
Peeps?
But yeah, Mary Magdalene wrote her own gospel.
Well,
even though I'm not certain on that one.
And
I have strong opinions on the Apocrypha that I will not voice all of here. But suffice to say, that scene frustrated me more than some of the pagan shit.
Like famously, none of the apostles were literate. That was the point.
Yeah, like
they were not the elites.
Yeah, the only person who actually wrote books that are attributed to him specifically in the New Testament was Paul. And even he didn't write all of them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I also have on my next page, I have, to be fair, it would have been weird for a 33-year-old Jew in that time not to have a wife, which fair, but not unusual, but not as unusual as they push it to be.
Yeah, I mean, I see again. I was saying earlier, I could see the appeal of this, and I will say this: even one of the authors of that awful book, Holy Blood, Holy Grail, actually did make this point where intuitively you could say this makes a lot of sense. Ask yourself what is more reasonable, that a man in Judea who was a preacher or whatever had a wife, got married, had children, or that he was born to a virgin, rose from the dead and performed all these miracles. What's more believable? Now, intuitively, you'd be like, okay, yeah, and that's why I see, again, why this whole conspiracy theory, I can see the appeal of it, because intuitively you could say, yeah, that makes a lot more sense than what's actually in the Bible if you look at it on that level. But
yes, but it plays onto our preconceived notions of the late 1990s and 2000s, not onto what was actually life was like in
also
Caesar era Judea.
Also,
but you can see how intuitively, on a surface level, though, that's what I mean. I can see the appeal of
definitely
this
Yes.
and this theory.
I think if someone didn't have a history or religion educational background, I can see why it would seem to make sense.
Also, I have no idea what the context for this is, but my next note is in all caps, that's not how paganism works. No idea what the context for that is.
Oh boy.
That was... I think Ring wanted to say a thing, but I think I might know what that was, Noodle.
But also, in terms of, finding out that Jesus, was actually, was a man and not, God from the beginning, is probably wouldn't break Christianity.
I think if you asked most modern Christians, regardless of denomination, do you think Jesus was a human being who lived and died as a human being? Outside of a religious setting, most of them would probably say yes, and it wouldn't have any impact on their religious faith at all.
Yeah, and, like, for one, there are plenty of other religions that revere a human and acknowledge their humanity. Islam.
Yeah.
Buddhism.
Yeah, Muhammad.
Yeah.
And
the Dalai Lama to an extent.
Yeah. And, secondly, the synoptic gospels are very adoptionist in their theology, where Jesus was a man who was adopted as the Son of God. And then it's only really when we get into John where we get super Jesus.
And I mean, to be fair, the idea of Jesus being adopted as the Son of God actually tracks more with cultural norms of the time.
Yeah.
Because it's what all the emperors did. They decided that they were actually of the line of Venus or of this god or that god. Or, Caesar famously adopted Augustus and gave him the name Caesar.
Yeah.
That was... It's a different culture than we're used to. And it's that unfamiliarity with that culture that breeds this inability to grasp it.
I would like to...
My third and final point. We're already getting something of a splinter sect of Christianity that is revering a man as the Messiah.
Trumpanzees, they're called.
Yeah. I think it's worth noting that a lot of the things that they described that certain believers at the time believed, there are genuine historical records of them being more popular than modern day views on Christianity. So they did get that correct. They were just very incorrect about how they described it.
The first Council of Nicaea, that's fair cop for that. But
I mean, I can, like I said, that I can see Locke went back to already seeing the appeal of the particular theory, the emotional appeal. And I think there's a similar thing that, because I think if you went back like sort of 20 years ago or whatever, you could see there's probably a lot. I wouldn't mind betting that there were a lot of atheists who were kind of behind the stuff being said in the Da Vinci Code. And I say that because there's a lot of atheists now who are behind Jesus mythicism, even though the vast majority of the history behind it is bollocks. And I mean, there's one or two, like I said, okay, Richard Carrier may be a little bit more respectable than most of them, but even he's not taken that seriously with his idea. His ideas are not taken that seriously.
We're getting on to a tangent, and Chaos had a point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's, there was the thing about like, so a lot of the historical ideas, because you were saying, Jeff, you can see the appeal behind it. That is one of the few actually accurate historical points they got. That wasn't part of the conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
And your note on paganism, Noodle, I'm pretty sure that was the scene where they said, where they started talking about how the pagans did rituals that involved those symbols.
Rituals.
Yeah.
Yes. Paganism is not Christianity in a funny hat, nor is it people having sex and doing all the icky stuff Catholicism doesn't let you.
Can I just say this is why I got out of paganism, because I found that out.
Valid. Fair, valid. But yes, that's probably why I put that in all caps there. And then we have that exposition dump, and then we have Robert Langdon, Sub Rosa. Sub Rosa, for anyone who's aware, is basically Chatham House Rule by a different name. Literally, a Sub Rosa by any other name would be Chatham House Rule. It basically means when we are Sub Rosa, what we say here stays here. It's nothing special.
Yeah,
it's just a code term.
It actually comes from the idea of putting a white rose on the door of a secret meeting.
Yeah, that's literally all it is.
So, yet another layer of meaning for Under the Rose, but there's only one secret, but there's only one secret meaning that stands through the dawn of time.
Yeah. Or to let me translate it into American, if any of you have ever lived in college dorms and seen a tie on the door handle, it's very similar to that. It's, don't knock, leave us alone, private here, what happens here stays here.
It's effectively, it's the do not disturb signs you get in hotels, essentially, isn't it?
It's literally what it is. It's a do not disturb sign. And it's a sign asking you for basic common decency. But yeah, that one was there. I do, obviously, knowing the end of this movie, spoilers if you're following us and you don't want me to know the ending, but Sophie not liking churches was the funniest thing to me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was just fucking hilarious. These places are creepy, no shit.
No, I actually say I have been in the location, because it's just down the road from my house where part of this movie was filmed.
But the Rosling Chapel?
No.
No, wait, hang on. Where are you based? I'm trying to remember where you're based.
Southampton. So where's near to Southampton that you think might have been used in this movie?
I'm from the north. I don't know any geography south of Birmingham.
Bloody northerners, I don't know. Uneducated bunch of... Well, I don't know. No. Okay. Little slight thing. Okay. Now we get to a scene, obviously, and I know we've probably jumped. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't think we're really going chronologically anymore. I don't know how we're going with this, but there's a scene that is reportedly supposed to be in Westminster Abbey. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Westminster Abbey wouldn't let them film in there.
Do you blame them?
Yeah, but Winchester Cathedral would let them film.
Oh, Winchester. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's just literally just up the road from me. It's just you know, see, they could have just done a little bit of a giveaway by putting the grave of Jane Austen in the shot, but they wouldn't do it. But
I don't know how it works now, but personal anecdote time. When I was applying to university, you got up to 5 options you could apply for. Winchester was one of my safety schools.
Yeah, so it's the way that it works. I'm pretty sure it's still the same. You get to pick 5 options,
School of Arts,
and when you've heard back from who is or isn't willing to give you provisional things, because pretty much
you then make a decision.
You then pick a first choice and a safety choice out of those 5.
Yeah, basically, Winchester was one of my safety schools.
I didn't,
because they offered American studies and history, but they focused more on American studies than history, which is what Hull did, which is why that was also one of my safety schools. But I wanted more history than American studies, but I did want American studies. So yeah, random anecdote.
Yeah.
And it was way too far south for me to go, like from Bradford. That would have been madness.
Yeah, that would have been a culture shock to you. I can guarantee.
To be fair, Leicester was a culture shock to me, and that's only 100 miles down the road. Leeds is a culture shock for me, and I go there every day for work.
To be honest, apart from the hat fair that takes place once a year, I tend to avoid Winchester.
Yeah. Okay, so do we want to talk about the cinematography of jump scares and horror movies? Because I feel like Ring probably has a comment on that.
No, I don't
Silas in the Westminster Abbey, appearing out of nowhere from being blurred in the background.
In the Templar Church. Yeah.
A lot of the shots felt shaky cam, not shaky cam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With the exceptions of scenes where you're getting into where you're getting into a character's mindset, i.e., the elevator scene with Langdon and the flagellation scene with Silas.
Yeah. Couple of observations I want to make. First of all, this is a pre-smartphone movie, which means that Chaos will have nothing to say about this because they don't remember that time. But for the rest of us, do you remember what it was like not owning smartphones?
Yes.
Like, this movie could have been solved by someone owning a Samsung S2 or an iPhone 2 or an iPhone 3. I mean, you just stood in Paris and Googled it a few times and you got the answer.
2006. This is just about the time we were getting cameras on phones at this point, and they weren't very good.
Yeah, I think when this film came out, I think my mum had a Nokia 3210.
I had that phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think everyone had that phone. Like, the end of the world will come, there will be a nuclear apocalypse, and then in a crater there will just be a Nokia 3210 with 1 bar of battery buzzing away. Like, that's how the world's going to end.
Yeah.
Like, that was back in the era when, and this is going to sound really weird to anyone who's younger, before smartphones, the pinnacle of technology was having the smallest possible flip phone. Like, we went from massive bricks, we tried to make phones smaller. Then smartphones came along and suddenly it was about getting a bigger screen. It's like, it was a complete change of...
I do remember this, but I was very young.
Now
I think that
flip phones are coming back.
I remember being in like year 4 and like the kids with the richest parents had a BlackBerry.
Yes. See, this movie was pre-BlackBerry. Because BlackBerries came out about 5 years after this movie, give or take. Or at least they hit my area about 5 years after this
I was
movie.
gonna
And-
But
say
I come from a poor area. It's probably two or 3 years after.
we are literally just getting into the era where cameras are starting to be put on phones at this time, and they're not particularly good quality.
Yeah, I genuinely feel like this is the era where the Motorola Razr is the pinnacle of technology. And that's just really weird to me. Like this, like that poor guy who's phone shot. Can you imagine his data bill?
Also,
Like that was back when we used to have phone packages that were like 4 people can call each other for free, and you also get 60 text messages a month.
Yeah.
Let's just put it this way: if he was on pay as you go, that would have conked out like really quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, can you imagine if he only had like £2 or £3 credit on it? Back in the days where you used to ring the automated number to put credit on your phone from a receipt you got from a corner shop.
Maybe that's what she was doing when she did the initial phone call.
Sorry,
also,
I think we're trying to get something out here. Sorry.
Yeah. Also, we're back to my my refrain for this stream about the disconnect between symbols and language are culturally specific in different contexts to the universal symbol and from the dawn of time, where we have a knight whose funeral was presided over by a pope.
I legit think at this point we just need like a thing that can come up on the screen and go, symbols are not universal every time we point out something that's changed since 2006.
That wasn't the segue where I thought you were going to go there, Ring, to be honest, when we mentioned pre-iPhone.
Well, because that's the scene where they bing the search terms was like, oh, Alexander Pope, a pope.
Yeah, like that's just, of course, that's how Google's going to respond to that.
Yeah. No, what I meant by that is which company makes the iPhone. That's what I thought the segue was going.
Okay. Look, I want you to close your eyes for a moment, and I want you to imagine a red ball, and I want you to imagine it's got seeds. What image is in your head right now? Why did you have to travel to London to find that image?
Yeah, that was the most. I'm actually pretty sure my year 3 teacher gave us that riddle.
Yeah. Like, you don't need to know who a pope is. You don't need to know that Newton was knighted. You don't need to know any of that shit. All you need to know is that a circle that's red with seeds is an apple.
Yeah.
Or a pomegranate, possibly, but...
Like, which, again, Channel Punching Bag, there's a riddle in the Channel Punching Bag's books of where he works it out by knowing, like, 2 bits of 5 of the different clues. And I genuinely, like, I don't credit Channel Punching Bag with that level of intelligence, but that could very well be a satire on shit like this.
Oh, she actually ripped it from another previous book.
Yeah, that'll work.
I mean, that's like for those who are Brian Jakes fans. That's down to that's like I am that is more clever than this.
I am that is.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Chaos has it. There happens to be a character in the in the first Red Ball book whose name is Matthias.
See, I remember getting really into Red Wall because my French teacher recommended it.
This is stuff I've not consumed. Media I've not consumed. So
So now with that one, we have this moment, and it's not made a lot of in the movie, but I'm sure Scummer remembers the book, where Fash is revealed to not be the bad guy.
Oh yeah, but for Fash the cop, and he's not a bad guy at all, really.
Yeah. He's just a guy trying to catch murderers.
Yeah,
and he thinks he's got them because why wouldn't he?
He's an overzealous cop, and he's a member of Opus Dei, and he's got.
Basically, he has his fix moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I feel
he's-
like his name being Fash gives me really obvious red herring villain vibes.
Yeah.
Yes. Like, that's
Yeah.
not even a French name.
Yeah.
Like,
No,
how would
so
you spell that
Basil-
in French?
Basil Fash, I believe, is the full name
Yeah.
of the character. But
So what, they gave him an Italian German name and made him the chief of police in Paris?
it's weird. Yeah, it's weird. I don't think they gave him a background that would actually.
Name makes no sense.
Yeah.
Well, it only does as something of a pseudo French pun.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Bezos sounds like the French word for kiss, so kiss is fascism.
I could
Yeah.
say, does anybody get the sense of a nursery rhyme out of the Bishop of Opus Dei?
What was his name?
Bishop Ringarosa.
A ring of roses, a pocket full of posies. Yeah. I think that wasn't that a gag in the book something to do with that poem.
Possibly,
I feel like I've heard a gag about that poem. Obviously, there's the thing of that. Okay. Historian hack, 2 minutes. That poem is not about the plague. Stop it. I didn't need 2 minutes. 12 seconds will do.
Yeah.
Just stop it.
But
See, I remember being taught that it was about the plague and going, really? That seems fake.
See, I always heard that,
Yeah.
but that you actually Noodle, I'm going to give you some credit. You've just taught me something that I didn't know because I've never bothered to really look into that nursery rhyme too. So
That right there. Right there. It sounded real, but I've never bothered to look into it. That is what this entire story is
there we
based
go.
upon.
I think I've just made
People
the quote.
hearing stuff that sounds real and thinking, that tracks, but not being bothered to look into it.
Yeah.
That's why
Yes.
this movie, because people were too fucking lazy in the pre-Google, pre-smartphone era to sit at their computer, dial up to the internet and Google an image of the Last Supper because it would have taken more than 30 seconds for the damn thing to load.
I think that is... I feel like something is quite often commented by... And this comment isn't made by people my age very often. I more hear it from kind of Gen X parents of my generation, that quite often we will Google shit on the fly. Like, Noodle, you might have noticed when I was with you the other day, occasionally you would say a thing and I would Google while you were talking.
Yeah. And I was doing the same when you were talking. This is
Yeah, but because this is a thing, I've heard a lot of Gen Xers be like, oh, millennials and Gen Z are a lot more suspicious of everything. And I think, no, if Gen X had that capacity, they probably would. They just
To be honest,
learned not to.
They didn't have... We don't have the hassle hurdle of having to walk or get on the bus to go to the library, to ask the librarian to find the book, to find the page, to check the thing. We just Google it.
See, I feel like I'm in a little bit of a unique place because I am like the literal tail end of Gen X. I'm like pretty much the last year of Gen X, I suppose. So I've kind of got, I'm an old fart in certain ways, but in other ways I'm like, oh, okay, I've got this stuff available to me. Let's try and find out. It's just, that particular thing that you just mentioned, I hadn't looked into, but you are absolutely right. And I think it's ironic. I think I've just made the quote of the entire stream by accident.
You have.
Because that is the Da Vinci Code in a nutshell.
Yeah.
People were either too lazy or too indifferent to actually look this shit up and then took it as truth.
And as I said earlier, I can see an emotional appeal of it as well.
Or they either took it as truth or took it as a demonic attack against the truth, against Christianity.
And then we get to the ending of this film, which is...
Oh, do we to talk about the reveal though? The big twist.
Yes, the big twist that I noticed in literally the first scenes.
Yeah.
I mean, from the moment she touches his face and he's suddenly magically not traumatized.
No,
if you didn't know
I
this
wasn't
was
meaning that.
going, you need to wake
I
up.
meant the villain reveal. I meant the reveal.
Again,
Who the villain,
again, the entire message of this movie is zealotry is always dangerous and zealotry is evil. You should have seen that coming.
Yeah. It's and this is the thing. I think I've mentioned. Okay, anyone who has read any of the Robert Langdon books. Now, I've read 3 of them, and it was enough to make me realise certain things keep recurring.
Yeah.
One of them is a plot twist with the villain.
Always.
This happens in Angels and Demons. It happens it happens in the Da Vinci Code, and it happens in The Lost Symbol. Sorry, I haven't even got to Inferno. I gave up on Dan Brown. I mean, to be honest, I did well to get to The Lost Symbol, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, I will say the line, it is foreshadowed what happens, because when they're in the chateau and they're talking and his butler buzzes through and he passes the comment of, I sometimes wonder who serves who.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to sit here and try and explain cinema's obsession with making it impossible to hear anything that's more than arm's reach away from you, because that's stupid. Because in the book, he actually went into another room, or at least further away. But the line from the butler is, they are on the news now.
Yep.
Lee already knew exactly what was going on before they knocked on his door.
Yeah.
He'd seen the news and he'd seen it from them.
He set this whole...
That's made much more clear in the book.
Yeah, and he set this whole process of events in motion, yeah.
Yeah. Like, I think it's even revealed in the book that when he tells them they're flying to Zurich, they're not actually, and he's already told the pilot that they're flying to England, not Zurich. Like, Lee's is not
it's been a while since I've read
difficult. Again, I'm going back 15 years. But, again, Lee is not a difficult guy to pinpoint and look at and go, you haven't been honest about anything, and also you're kind of crazy. You're the villain.
Yeah. But this is very much, again, and you don't even have to read any Dan Brown books. Go watch the movie Angel with Demons. It's the same goddamn plot twist with the villain.
It is. It's literally Angels and... Do you know what? I prefer Angels and Demons as a film. Because the book came out first before Da Vinci Code, but also because Rome's prettier than Paris, and that's the only difference.
Yeah.
And I'll also say, the book Angels and Demons is even fucking worse than the Da Vinci Code.
For inaccuracy, yes, but
not
at
just
least
inaccurate, but
does.
Just in far-fetchedness as well.
I mean, to me, that book has a special place in my heart because I love Rome, so it's just a tourist thing for Rome. But yeah, it's not. None of these books should be taken. I don't care what Dan Brown says. The guy's a fucking hack who doesn't know the first thing. But I've just been reading on that website you were talking about, History versus the Da Vinci Code.
Yeah.
Apparently, Dan Brown admitted that he never read any history books prior to writing these books. And the person who did his research for him was his wife, who would then send him summaries by email of the pertinent points that were relevant to his book. And he claimed when he wrote Da Vinci Code and he got sued, he claimed he'd never read the book that they were suing him over because he had, and I quote, a short attention span.
That's just on the first page of this website as well. Yeah. By the way, I believe I've just posted a link to that. That's a guy, by the way, I've interviewed a couple of times on my channel called Tim O'Neill, who wrote that blog. He currently writes a blog called History for Atheists, where he should we say, corrects atheists on some bad history. And I've had him on like to talk about, hey, maybe why it wasn't like things like the burning of the Great Library of Alexandria and what really happened with that as an example.
Personally, for me, the history montages were too mid-aughts, oversaturated, stylized.
Yeah. I mean, from a purely cinematography point of view,
Yeah.
they are very much of their time. Like, you will show someone that in a cinema class in, like, 2137, and they'll say that's from the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Like, that's how that will go down. It was very... It was colourful. It's very good at making the audience feel clever.
Yeah.
Without actually requiring anything resembling critical thinking.
Yeah.
And the book does the same thing. It makes the audience feel clever.
It does, yeah. Because and I can see this because like I can read the book and you can like, for the first time you haven't read any of the real history or anything, you can be like, oh, that's interesting. There's a lot of things that say that you can be like, oh, that's really interesting and whatever. Take that on board, but not realise this is not actual history. And but it sounds, it can, like I said, it's intuitive. But it can be appealing on an intuitive level.
Well, that's the thing. That's the fallacy it applies to. It takes your preconceived notions and it plays with them.
Yeah.
And what it does, it flatters you. And therefore, because you feel flattered and because you feel clever, you don't necessarily question it.
So maybe I'm wondering if Dan Brown does that as an author, is he actually a very good author or a really crap author? I don't know, because if he's capable of doing that with people.
My opinion on Dan Brown is that he's in the wrong fucking genre. He should have been off writing Fast and Furious movies.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I did like the water gag at the end.
Yeah.
The gag with the water. That was fun. That was a cute little, okay.
Yeah.
And that final... the romance dodge was helpful because the romance in the book was really shoehorned.
That was shoehorned literally in at the end because there have been. That's one of the things I got. And one of the things Dan Brown always kind of comes back to is having essentially the intelligent female sidekick to Langdon. That is a recurring theme in the books.
The thing with that as well is that in the Da Vinci Code book, he's actually still grieving the loss of the relationship from angels and demons.
Yeah.
But the way Dan Brown writes women, and I say women because he works within a cis heteronormative paradigm, so I'm going to criticize it within that paradigm. He writes women in the same way people design magician shows. They are the glamorous assistant who just happens to be cleverer than the magician. And who does all the work. But then the magician gets the credit.
Yeah.
And it's a very late 90s, early noughties paradigm.
I haven't really read it, but I believe even in Inferno, the woman sidekick is like a chess grandmaster or something.
Yeah.
So
like the women are clearly there to make up for Langdon's lack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yet it's almost it's I don't know. It's one of those things. Certainly in this particular series, it's something Dan Brown comes back to time and time again, like the twist with the villain. Oh, and there was one thing I was going to mention. I think I'll get it out now. Which is a big difference between the film and the book. We were talking about Opus Dei earlier, weren't we? And this is where I think one big difference that the film makes, where I think in a way that the film maybe villainizes the Catholic Church even more. Is this whole notion of the Council of Shadows, that this group of despots, of high-ranking church people, that is portrayed in the film, that the Bishop of Opus Dei is part of. In the book, from what I remember, the Bishop of Opus Dei is actually more a useful fool who is being played by T-Bing, and he's been because if I recall in the book, there was the Bishop of Opus Dei. Now, whether this is going to happen or not, I know he believed that the Pope was going to excommunicate Opus Dei from the Catholic Church, and he felt if he could actually provide the Holy Grail to the Catholic Church, there's no way they could do it. So he was a desperate man, and that, if I recall this in the book, that as soon as he starts because he gives Silas to the teacher, but then as soon as he starts realizing that Silas is going around killing people, he kind of rushes. He's the whole reason he's flying to Paris. He's trying to get to the scene to fucking to stop Silas and put an end to the whole madness, because it's gone. So he's more in the book. The bishop's less a villain and more a useful fool.
Yeah. Okay. I've just understood. I've just found a quote that explains Dan Brown's entire motive for the way he writes his books.
Okay.
And I quote, as he claims that he was raised Episcopalian and describes himself as very religious as a kid, then in 8th or 9th grade studied astronomy, cosmology, and the origins of the universe, and saying to a minister, "I don't get it. I read a book that said there was an explosion, but here it says God created heaven and earth and the animals in 7 days, which is right." And the response I got was, "Nice boys don't ask that question."
So Dan Brown's an angry atheist.
He's an angry atheist.
That says a fucking
which explains
lot.
a lot.
That explains a lot.
So the actual antagonist of the book was the author. Gotcha.
Yeah.
There we go. I think we solved it.
We solved it. Which, he was an angry atheist, and I mean, don't get me wrong. Again, I mean, I will say, as much as I've trashed this book, this author, this movie, and every aspect of it, this book does hold a special place in my heart.
Yeah.
Because I was that early preteen, kind of preteen kid reading this book. And this book was one of the many straws on the camel's back that made me sort of look at the Catholic Church and go, hang on, something's not quite right here. Now, I went one step further than Dan Brown expects his audience to do and actually did my research on this shit.
Yeah.
But I probably wouldn't have done that research if I hadn't seen this book and gone, hang on, is that what the church is? Wait, what? And so to that extent, this book was kind of pivotal for me in that sense. That doesn't necessarily mean it was a good book, but it was the book that I needed at the time and at the point I was at.
So
I could have done without the anti-pagan bigotry and all the rest of it, but yeah, it gave me. It was the spark that said to me, "Hang on, maybe you should start asking more questions and stop listening to priests who tell you to just behave and have faith."
So it sounds kind of like it was to you what the God delusion was to a lot of people who are now more reasonable atheists.
Yeah.
Possibly, yeah. And it was one of the few books I could get a hold of because it was fictional, and therefore it wasn't too weird for me to get into it, and I could just pass it off as I'm reading this because it's fictional and not because I believe or this has made me question anything deeper than that. And it's a story. So in that sense, it was a handy I don't want to say it was a catalyst, but maybe it was the fuel to the fire. It turned the spark to a fire kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I will say there is one moment in this movie that I laughed out loud at, and it's right near the end of the movie. And it's so telling, and it's so brilliant, and it's fucking hilarious. There's a moment Robert Langdon is sat in his hotel room, thinking to himself, and he picks up his own book to check something that he's written before going to the Louvre.
Yeah.
And if that is not exactly a perfect encompassing of what it is to be an academic when you don't remember the shit you wrote last week, so you have to go check your own writing, because you might be an expert on this shit, but that doesn't mean you remember it off the top of your head. It's that.
Yeah.
And it's, that is a really, and this is, if there's one praise I would give to this thing, and I would give to the plot itself and to Dan Brown, is that he understands how humans work, and he understands how people's minds work, and he played on that and potentially preyed on that. But I think that's why this book was so successful, and that's why this book will, as much as we've trashed it and everything else, this book will be something that is potentially useful going forward, if only because it's a really interesting point to look at the reception of early 2000s approaches to religion, religious understanding, and pre-revival era perceptions of paganism.
Yeah.
If nothing else, it's a useful data point.
Yeah, it's a really useful data point, and there's a lot of places you can jump off from it. The danger with this book, which is I think what we've been saying all along, is that people read this book and stopped.
Yeah.
So this book, in a roundabout way, and I'm sure I'm going to piss Dan Brown off by saying this if he ever hears this, is that this book has exactly the same problem that the Bible has. People read that one book and then stopped. It's like, we have a book. Yes, what your problem is that you need to read more books.
Yes. Also, I am going to say, if you want to watch a much better, secret history MacGuffin movie featuring the Templars, National Treasure's right there.
Yeah. What's the one where they steal the Declaration of Independence?
National Treasure.
Yeah, that one. That one's okay. Hell, watch Indiana Jones if you want.
Yeah.
At least that's not pretending like it's actually researched history.
Yeah.
But yeah, Dan Brown is very good at action trope movies and books, not necessarily good at underpinning that with anything resembling a fact. Anyway, what was you saying, Chaos?
I was going to say that I feel like there are some positive things from this film. Don't be an extremist, and that sort of thing. But it
also moments of good cinematography.
Oh yeah, no, like the acting in this movie is superb. The score is, if it was anyone but Zimmer, I'd say it was excellent. But for Zimmer, it's an off day. Like,
yeah,
it's not one.
The
It's not one of his
cinematography
better
is
ones.
spot on.
This film gives to me the vibes of a pastor giving a bit of a nothing burger of a sermon, but there's still some harmful shit in there, even though you can just sit there and have a relaxed day at church.
I know a chill guy, and his name is Robert Langdon. Like, that's what you're getting from that.
Unfortunately, this is the thing. I put this in the chat. I had a question to ask you guys when I got back from a cigarette break, but I think Noodle just answered it already, and that was about the pros and cons of this book, and I think you just answered it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't claim to be normal by any stretch. And I know that, and therefore I might be in the minority of people who looked at this, saw that there was something to be questioned there, and actually went and did the research. But if that's what this book did for you, like, this is why I'm a great believer, and we're talking about censorship and everything else this month. I don't want this book censored. I don't want this book burned.
No, I made the joke earlier, but I would seriously.
It's one of those things. There are many paths to education and many paths to, and many things that may put you on the path to doing the research for something. And they're all equally valid. Like, I don't care if you went and researched something because you want to put it in a fan fiction, or because you want to win an argument at school, or because someone made a bet to you in the pub, or because you read a weird book and thought, hey, that don't track, or I don't care. Like, you asked the question, and that's what matters.
I do have a thought on this book as well. And again, we can put it in the time and the context and period of time it was released. But there's another thing that I think it was the reaction from churches across the world to this book.
Yeah.
Now, does anyone else think there was a little bit of, should we say, Streisand effect that kind of went on here with them wanting to try and
probably
shut this down? And maybe the fact that they reacted in the way they did to this added to the popularity, because people wanted to see what the fuss was about. I think, because I definitely think that's why I went and got this book and read it, because I wanted to see what all the hurrah was about.
Also,
hey, Scummer, answer me a question. If a song gets banned, what happens to it?
Number one, baby.
Also, props to Dan Brown for succeeding in something for the first time in a few centuries. Is he actually got the Catholics and the Protestants to agree on something?
Shit, yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
I mean, some of the Catholics, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if Dan Brown could just get the left to agree on something, that'd be a miracle.
Look, I'm not being funny, but if the left ever agrees on anything, I will go back to the Catholic Church on my hands and knees in apology.
Also, native atheists, I would love to. I would love to cover Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer. That's one of my
what
favorite
do you mean
books.
He wasn't? Wait, what do you mean he wasn't a vampire hunter?
That sucks. I thought that was real history right there.
To be honest, I see that's the kind of movie though. I wouldn't even care that that's not real history. It's just like we know it's not.
But yeah, there's something I want to bring up, because I know we're winding down, but there's a really important theme and commentary that we've kind of glazed over. And we're doing Banned Book Month this month, and we're doing horror next month as well, with it being October. The vilification of the other. And this book is really explicit on that. There's this line, Robert Langdon says the line of, people fear what they don't understand.
Yeah.
You've got this albino character of Paul Bettany. Paul Bettany's French and Latin, by the way, fucking atrocious. Ugh.
Yeah.
Paul, I'm going to say I do like Paul Bettany as an actor, but
this is not one of his best.
Not his best performance. And I've never seen an albino with blue eyes before.
I think that's technically, but
very bright blue eyes.
Saying. And it's like, you sort of look at it and you think, this film's very good at pointing out that you cannot demonize the other as a broad generalization.
Yeah.
And I think for that point, Fash is very important, because we see Fash, and Fash for me gives me vibes of the Terminator. It's like the whole point of the Terminator is you spend the first movie terrified he's trying to kill John Connor, and then you find out he's trying to protect him.
Well, I mean,
second movie,
Well, I
Second
mean,
movie, yeah.
in the second movie, he was reprogrammed and sent back again. But
Well, yeah. I'd also
And it's
say
like-
I refuse to recognize anything in Terminator after Terminator 2. I just
Valid,
refuse to
yeah.
recognize anything.
No,
in
but what I'm getting at is there's this book's very good and this film's very good at calling you out on your natural inclination to assume that all cultures and all groups are a monolith. You are naturally inclined and you are primed by this film and by this book to believe that Opus Dei are a bunch of zealous, vicious, violent people who will kill and die to protect the secret of the church.
But-
But the priest is, the cardinal's a useful fool. Silas is a zealot who's, just doing as he's told. Again, let's not get down that route, but Silas is what he is. And the copper is actually a good guy who in the end helps them once he realizes that he's been played.
Yeah.
And you then have the person you're presented to as a friend is actually not a friend, is the villain. Also, just as a general rule in the Robert Langdon series, how does that guy know so many people who are fucking nuts? Like, they all turn out to be like friends who are actually like the secret villain. Like, dude.
Maybe he went to the
but-
school for villains and didn't realize it.
That's
I mean, that's a scathing indictment of Harvard right there.
well, yeah. Well, look. I mean, look. He maybe that's the curse of being a symbologist. Because that's a job that only exists in the movies or in
Yeah,
Dan
that
Brown's
job doesn't
world.
exist in real life.
Yeah.
It maybe
I-
there's some parallel universe where this is actual history. I don't fucking know, but
Yeah, I think the closest academic role to that is probably art historian.
Yeah. See,
Maybe.
an impression I get from this film and from what I know about the book, that I was not cognitively aware enough at the time to be able to know this, but an impression I get is that the Da Vinci Code filled a cultural niche that was waiting to exist and is useful to have existed in the
Yes.
past,
yeah.
even if it isn't in and of itself a net positive, which is, a thing you could debate on.
Yeah, I think above all, Dan Brown was an excellent salesman who had the right product at the right time.
Yeah, because I don't know today whether it would cause such.
Because people just Google it and be like, "Nah, Mary wasn't wearing that
the
color on the Last Supper."
The thing is, like, I know we're talking about it years later. It's not that talked about today. I don't find that book. Now there was a whole. Not just the fact that the book and the film, but there was a whole bunch of like documentaries or whatever, like the real Da Vinci Code kind of thing. There was a whole bunch of like goddamn History Channel things. I think one of the better ones I would say.
I'm not saying Jesus was an alien, but
yeah,
aliens.
Yeah. But so maybe it caught the sort of cultural mood at the time as well, the cultural zeitgeist, if you wish, and. Where I don't know necessarily today that it would if it was released now. And as I said as well, look, I do think there was an element of Streisand effect. The church had a massive uproar about this book, and people went and bought it to see what all the fuss was about. And I was definitely one of them, and then kind of realised this isn't actually a very good book.
I mean, if you've got a lazy Sunday afternoon and the sun's out and you're drinking a few gin and tonics and you want something that's not going to take too much brain work, by all means read it.
Yeah.
If it's a winter's day and you sat down and you're drinking a few gin and tonics and you want something on TV that's not going to take too much brain work, by all means watch it. I say gin and tonics because that's what I'm drinking. But whatever you drink.
Or alternatively, if you want, just watch Cobra Kai on Netflix or something,
You can watch...
Yeah.
Or, if you want something that scratches a similar itch but does it better, just watch National Treasure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd say
It's
that.
like-
I'd say that.
It is I think it's a mediocre plot that got attention because it pissed off the wrong people, and we all know religious zealots are touchy.
Mm.
Which is really funny given that the theme of the book is don't be a zealot.
Yeah.
But from a point of view of censorship, and from a point of view of this book being banned or challenged, I think they just poured fuel on the fire. If they'd have ignored this book,
Yeah.
most people would not have given a shit. It'd have been a semi-decent, it'd have been a mediocre movie on Tom Hanks's CV.
Yeah.
And no one would have really
would
remembered
this have-
it.
Would this have been a movie with the likes of Tom Hanks, Ian McKellen, or whatever, if there'd not been this uproar and there'd not been,
Yeah.
like I said,
Yeah,
the Streisand effect of it,
Like without the church trying to ban it, it probably would have been just another mediocre airplane book.
It might have been a TV movie. It might have been a TV movie or something,
No, it legit would have been that book you pick up in an airport when you've got time to kill before you board. That's what it would have been.
Yeah.
And it'd have had a small cult following. It'd have been like, is it Hustler? Dan Hustler, his name is, does those big books that are just very similar. Clive Hustler, something like that. Very similar sort of historical mystery books.
Yeah.
And people would have just ignored it. But when you draw attention to something, you get wackos on the morning TV telling you that they're the descendant of Jesus Christ. Which, even if you could prove that, sweetie, you don't go on morning TV about it. That's just no.
No.
Look,
you go on something like Media Musings, which just to say I have an announcement to make.
Look, the World Weekly News called. They want an interview.
Yeah.
That's what that's for,
I've got the hair. I just don't have the beard.
Yeah, I feel for the people who were taken in by that and who fell for the mass hysteria, because when you think about them being on the morning TV, and I was probably too young to have grasped what I was seeing at the time, but were they being put there because it was a serious conversation they were having, or were they being held up as an object of ridicule?
I'd say in most cases the latter. From the ones I saw,
honestly, that's
well. There was a woman who was quite often put onto British television by people like Clive Anderson. Maybe Jonathan Ross had her on, but this is before the Da Vinci Code had been released. But there was a woman that was dragged onto British TV, and she was kind of mocked. I forget her name, but she claimed to be the reincarnation of Lady Guinevere from the Arthurian legends.
Yeah, it's like Seti from the one who claims to be the reincarnation of a pharaoh's wife. I mean, yeah, she knows shit that's a bit weird, but most people are going to look at that as an object of ridicule.
Yeah, it's like there's certain things that it was a certain thing they'd bring certain characters on, certainly onto British TV at the time, like her or whatever, or even David Icke when he was still going through "I'm the Son of God" phase before he went into his other nutty conspiracy theory stage.
Why do half of conspiracy theories come back to Icke though?
I guess they just like Icke.
I'd say 9/11 did an awful lot to help boost his popularity, because I don't think anybody took him seriously before that.
So what I want to do, it feels like we're kind of getting to the end, but I want to ask the question. This film triggered conspiracy theories and a lot of problems in the media and in the press and just in general day-to-day life, it made a lot of people believe things that are demonstrably not true. If you had to make a decision of how and when you would publish this text, is there anything you would have done differently if you'd have been the publisher or you'd have been the PR agent?
Very simply, would have probably made a bit clearer that this is a work of fiction. And that's about it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Look, yeah, it's to be honest. Okay, I made the joke earlier about God, if we were going to burn a book, God damn it. Yeah, I don't really mean that. I don't even think Stuart Lee really meant that when he made that joke.
Like,
it was just more of a commentary on how bad people thought the book was or whatever. Like, God, but no, do I think this story should be censored or whatever? No, I don't even think the bad history that started this, all the Holy Blood and Holy Grail, should be censored. I think it should be, it should be out there in publication. I don't think anybody should take it seriously. I don't think anybody should take the Da Vinci Code seriously. It's my whole issue with the book was, and we went over this at length earlier, Dan Brown trying to claim that stuff in this book was historical fact and then doubling down on that time and time again when he's been called out on it. That's been my main issue with it. But no, should it be censored? Absolutely not.
Yeah. Basically, I would have put this is like the legal, this is a work of fiction, all the person's real or it.
I mean, to be fair, I think in the book it does have that.
Well, yeah, it's like every book has it as a lawsuit shield, but I would have had that like a couple of font sizes larger than the rest of the text on that page and like bolded it.
Yeah. I think I have two answers. One for if I was personally the publisher, and the other from like a tactical publishing point of view.
Mm-hmm.
If I were the publisher, honestly, pretty much the same as Ring and Jeff, with maybe the addition of like a more explicit some of the historical claims in this book are for the purposes of narrative. But from a more publishing point of view, on the release weekend, I'd have set up a book signing near the Vatican.
Tracks. See, for me, I think what I'd have done, I'd have released the book as is. But what I'd have done, I'd have gone round religious academics and I'd have said, hey, who wants to write me a foreword?
Yeah.
And I'd have let some academic rip it to shreds and put that in as a foreword. And then I'd have put the foreword and then I'd have had the page in which Dan Brown claims it's true.
Yeah, because I think you and I, Noodle, come from a very similar point on this, that our main big issue has been Dan Brown claiming the stuff in his is historical fact, and he has repeatedly doubled down on this time and time again when he's been called out. That's been my big issue with this book. It's my big issue with Dan Brown. It's like, dude, you're not a you are not a historian. You're not a historical researcher. You should not be going around claiming that this is historical fact unless you can back your shit up, which Dan Brown just cannot do.
Can't do.
Yeah.
And that, for me, I think is... Or what I would have done as the publisher is gone and found a religious academic and said, hey, do you want to write a new book about how this book is all bullshit? I'll publish it. And I'd have released it in the same weekend.
Yeah.
there have. Okay, wouldn't have been the same week, but there have been whole
Yeah.
books debunking this thing. There's been I posted the link to Tim's, Tim's thing of the history versus the Vinci Code earlier.
Absolutely, full on. That's why throughout this whole thing, what I've been doing is ranting that it's ahistorical rather than going out of my way to debunk it. If you want to debunk it, just Google the thing that you think might not be true, and you'll find something debunking it.
Yeah.
As
I said at the beginning of this stream, had we just came on, we're 3 hours and 20 minutes into this stream, so, and we're kind of somewhat wrapping up. Had we just come on here and talked about the bad history in the Da Vinci Code, this would be like a 4-part episode of 4-hour-long streams.
Plus, we wouldn't have said anything new.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But I think for me, this book is an example of why you shouldn't believe everything you read. You shouldn't believe even when the author tells you it's true. And I think to an extent, Dan Brown, whether knowingly or otherwise, because I don't know the man's motivations, is engaging in a form of propaganda in which he's presenting his version of the facts as facts. And he's twisting things to suit his point of view. And I think this book could be a very useful way. If I was going to use this book in an academic setting, how I would use this book, I would read it and I would sit down and I would teach people how to recognize the logical fallacies, the claims to authority by putting the information in the voice of Oxford graduates and lecturers. That's a clear appeal to authority. And I would use this book in that way to teach potentially logical fallacies and to teach people how to engage critically with media, regardless of what the press and the media are doing around it.
Yeah.
Because the press and the media, I think, were the problem with this book. The press and the media gave this book way too much airspace. It's the same reason that they made the same mistake they made with Donald Trump. If you'd have just ignored it, it'd have gone away.
Yeah.
This book, like I said, the frenzy around this book added to the sales and added to the fact, and like I said, to the fact that there was this big budget movie that we just watched with the likes of Tom Hanks, Ian McKellen, Paul Bettany, Jean Reno, and so on in it, and otherwise, if there'd not been this frenzy, like I said earlier, I think this might have been like a TV movie, like a Saturday night television movie somewhere in America or whatever, that would be, some people might watch it, but that's kind of where I feel this whole thing would have been at. And I know
it might have given.
It was a Streisand effect. I've said that, the Catholic Church in particular, not just the Catholic Church, even a lot of the, like the Anglican Church, took real exception to this book and got in a huff about it. People and maybe again, as well, maybe because of the nature of the time, the place and the time, and people were looking for alternative, should we say, understandings of spirituality or whatever. It caught it. I think the time it was released in had something to do with this popularity as well.
Yeah. I do think as well, and the thought has just occurred to me as you were talking, Scummer, so it may not be fully formed. I wonder how much of this modern... There's a thing specifically American Protestants do. They like to accuse Catholics of being Mary worshippers. And I wonder how much of that is a result of the furor around this book in the early 2000s.
I don't know. I couldn't answer
I
that.
think
I mean,
I'm not saying it doesn't predate it,
Yeah.
but what I'm saying
I
is
think it.
that becoming sort of stuck
think it-
in the consciousness.
I mean, it definitely.
I wonder if it had an
definitely-
impact.
It definitely predates it. Did it get accentuated by this?
Yeah.
Quite possibly. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but quite possibly.
Yeah. My suspicion would be that this validated that claim for a lot of people, and I feel like a lot of the Protestants who were ostensibly angry with it probably liked a lot of the anti-Catholic things in it.
Yeah. And that's I think the key success of this book was that it fed confirmation bias. No matter, like, it relied on, you have an opinion, even if it's not fully formed, this book solidified that opinion.
Definitely, if you've got a predisposition to dislike the Catholic Church, yeah, you're going to be on board with this. If you're already predisposed to think that way, and again, there's an awful lot of stuff that I especially hear atheists repeating that is bad history around the Catholic Church. And it's kind of like, yeah, they're horrible. Listen, we don't need to make stuff up about them. We really don't. They're horrible.
Like, the shit they've done is enough. You don't need to add to it.
Their shit list is long enough.
But there is, like, I mean, I'm reading some of the articles Tim wrote, and there's a lot of misconceptions around the Catholic Church and, should we say, the World War II period. There's a lot of misconceptions there, which I won't get into here because that could be a long talk in itself. But
yeah, it's one of those things where this film, I think, from a point of view of, I don't believe in censoring adult media, and this was adult media. But I think what this film did and what this book did is reveal, I think, the utter lack of media literacy in large swathes of the population. And I don't think that is a cause to call for censorship. I think that's a cause to call for better education.
Yeah.
I would say that, though. I mean, it's a time, though. You got also remember looking. I mean, it's almost 20 years since this book's been released. I mean, I don't know now. Are people reading more now or less now than, or the generation that's coming now? Are they reading more now or less now?
Less.
A lot less.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah,
I can tell you, having existed around people of my generation, the answer is I am one of maybe 1% of people my age I know who can say I've read a book in the last year.
Yeah.
I will say as well, and with all love for you, Chaos, your generation's media literacy is shocking.
Oh, it's awful, and
I'm
this
not
is why
saying mine's any better, but your generation's media literacy is shocking.
I think, Nudo, I think you're in a sweet spot there with your generation, because Chaos is shocking, but I reckon if you looked at mine, it's shocking as well. So
I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm tail end of millennials.
Yeah, so I think you guys are in a sweet spot.
But I mean, that's kind of the whole, thesis of this project is to promote media literacy.
Yeah. I mean, it's like I said. I mean, look, my ex was heavily into books, and she would probably admit that the channel Punching Bag had a lot to do with that because it kind of came out at the right time for her.
I have an entire shelf on my bookshelf dedicated to the channel Punching Bag.
Yeah.
Because I just own so many versions of those books and so much merch for it that I collected before she went full turf.
Death of the author and all that.
Yeah. Well, I've already paid for them. Like, what the hell, you know?
Yeah.
And they're useful for when I want to write criticisms
And
of
I
aspects of them.
I can
Come up off the
definitely
shelf.
remember speaking as a postal worker, the furore, the day one of her books came out, in that, you know, in the Harry Potter series, the amount of parcels that we were getting all the same size, which we knew was the new Harry Potter book coming out, always on a Saturday when we wanted to go home early as well.
Yeah. Well, this was the thing, because they got to the point
So
where
look,
they had to release the book on a weekend, otherwise kids would be
Yeah.
up all night reading it before school.
I was kind of pissed because it's like, see, I disliked her before it was cool because of that. Because she made me work late on weekends, and I was not happy with her.
Yeah.
I imagine.
I mean,
So, I think that's good enough for final thoughts.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I think so.
I
Yeah.
think we're about there.
So, Shilling, Scummer, do you have anything coming up?
I've got a channel, obviously, God the Scummer on YouTube. I've not been very. I've been, because of stuff that's going on, real life stuff or whatever. I haven't been quite so active recently. There are a couple of things stories I hope to get the guys from the Free for Profit on at some point, podcast, because I want to talk about the fuckery with Atheist Alliance International, because that's a story I've been kind of following. I'm still talking privately to to Cindy Lincoln. I'm hoping to get her on. For those who don't know Cindy, that's Kent Hovine's ex-wife. Hoping to get her on at some point. But I think both myself and Cindy have been very busy recently. But she is a young Earth creationist, but she's a very nice lady, and just was unfortunately fell for a horrible human being at one point in her life. So
The heart wants what the heart wants. You can't blame her for that.
But she knows, but she's realizes that he's a horrible human being now. So anyway, yeah.
Chaos, anything?
So I do have a channel. I've not uploaded anything in a while, and I do have a project in the works, but that may be several months coming, because if I turn my camera on, you might be able to see new background. That's because I've just moved to uni.
Ooh.
So that is taking precedence for a while, but there is a project in the works.
Noodle?
I don't really have anything to shill. What I will shill is we have a card for this channel now, which I have been creating and will be curating. Keep an eye on Ring's Twitter for it, and that will have a list of all past episodes, which I've been through and numbered and listed for you, but also we'll have a list of future episodes. So if there's anything we're covering that you want to read about or quickly Google and check the Wikipedia page for before watching this, so you know what the hell we're on about, you can do that. And that's going to be a little bit easier for you going forward as well.
Yep. So the fate of secular D&D is still up in the air. Partially from lacking players, and partially from the fact that my schedule's kind of shaken up a little bit. So also the card is in the description. If when I find the time and the spoons, I'll try and do more edited content. But I've also got other things that my brain is working on that I really should get onto paper. If you follow my Twitter, especially in regards to my interaction with the TTRPG side of Twitter, you know what I'm talking about. So concretely, next week we are discussing the Bridge to Terabithia. And we are going to finish off Banned Book Month by discussing the school board meeting where they decided to remove Mouse, the Art Spiegelman graphic novel about the Holocaust, from their curriculum. And I actually managed to track down the minutes from that meeting, and we're going to be going over that and probably kind of expanding it out into other censorship attempts by the Fundagelicals, because they've been busy little beavers this year.
Yes.
Yeah. And keep an eye on that. And also the card, the link to the card is in the description. So, and with that, I think we'll move to taglines. Scummer?
I'll just say, always remember to point the right way. Salute.
Yeah.
Have a day, and remember, communication is key.
Yeah.
Take care, be good, and if you can't be good, be careful.
Oh, I got a little another little tagline just for the moment. In the moment, solidarity to striking workers in the UK at the moment. I want to get that out there for.
Yeah.
Aye.
And remember, the purpose of a storyteller is not to tell you how to think, but to give you questions to think on. Too often, we forget that. And also,
before we go, I would like to point out that you have now had 3.5 hours of content with British voices in which no one mentioned the fucking Queen.